Story 1. The doctor came into the waiting room and said, "Your father didn't make it." I'm sorry. Before I could process it, my stepmother pointed at me and screamed, "This is your fault. You stressed him to death." My half-siblings joined in, "Murderer. He died hating you." Security had to escort me out while they sobbed for the cameras. I wasn't allowed at the funeral. 6 months later, my father's actual will surfaced, the one my stepmother had hidden. And the video recording he left with his lawyer made my stepmother's face go completely white. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The security guard's hand on my shoulder felt like a vice as he marched me through the hospital corridor. Behind me, I could still hear Marianne wailing about her poor Richard and how I'd driven him to an early grave. My half-brother Tyler was filming everything on his phone, probably already drafting the social media post that would paint me as a monster. Standing in the parking lot, watching the automatic doors slide shut, I felt nothing. Numbness had replaced shock, which had replaced the brief moment of grief I'd been allowed before Marianne turned me into a villain. My father was dead. The man who'd raised me, who taught me to throw a baseball, who helped me with my calculus homework, gone. And I couldn't even say goodbye. My phone buzzed. A text from my girlfriend, Emma, "Just saw Tyler's post." What happened? What happened? 3 years ago, my father married Marianne Chen, a woman 20 years his junior with 2 adult children from a previous marriage. What happened was I questioned the prenup she'd demanded. What happened was I hired a private investigator to check her background. What happened was I found irregularities in her first husband's death, nothing criminal, but suspicious enough to make me uneasy. When I told Dad, he accused me of being jealous. Said I couldn't handle him finding happiness after Mom died. We hadn't spoken in 14 months. I drove home in a daze, Emma's worried texts piling up unanswered. The house felt too quiet. I poured myself water I didn't drink and stared at my phone, watching Tyler's video rack up views. Hundreds of comments calling me every name imaginable. People who didn't know me, didn't know Dad, passing judgment based on 30 seconds of performative grief. 3 days later, I received a letter from Dad's estate attorney, Gregory Walsh. Standard stuff about probate, but one line caught my attention: "Please contact me at your earliest convenience regarding matters your father wished to discuss with you privately." I called immediately. Walsh's secretary scheduled me for the following afternoon. When I arrived at his downtown office, Marianne was already there, flanked by Tyler and his sister Madison. She shot me a look of pure venom. "He has no right to be here," Marianne said to Walsh. "Richard told me he'd cut him out completely." Walsh, a silver-haired man in his 60s, gestured for everyone to sit. "Mrs. Fletcher, I understand this is difficult, but I must follow your late husband's instructions. The will reading proceeds as planned." We sat in tense silence. Walsh adjusted his glasses and began reading. The will was dated 18 months prior, 3 months after Dad married Marianne. It left everything to her: the house, the investment accounts, the business Dad had built from nothing. Total value, roughly $8 million. Tyler actually smirked at me. Madison whispered something to Marianne, who nodded with satisfaction. However, Walsh continued, "There is one bequest to Marcus Fletcher." He looked at me. "Your father left you his collection of baseball cards, appraised at approximately $1,200, and a letter." The room erupted. Marianne's face flushed with triumph while my half-siblings laughed. $1,200. Dad's estate was worth millions, and I got baseball cards. Walsh handed me an envelope. Inside, in Dad's handwriting, "Marcus, these cards meant something to us once. I hope they still do. Look closely at the 1952 Mickey mantle. All my love, Dad." I left before I could break down in front of them. In my car, I turned the envelope over and over. The 1952 Mickey mantle was the crown jewel of Dad's collection, worth maybe $200 on its own. What was I supposed to see? Back home, I retrieved the collection from storage. Dad had given it to me years ago for safekeeping. I found the mantle card in its protective sleeve and examined it under bright light. Nothing unusual. I checked the back, the edges, held it up to the window. Then I noticed the protective sleeve itself. There was something inside it, behind the card, a thin piece of paper folded tight. My hand shook as I carefully removed the card and extracted what turned out to be a safe deposit box key taped to a post-it note with an address. The next morning, I went to the bank branch listed on the note. The manager confirmed my name was authorized on the box. Inside, I found a USB drive and a sealed envelope marked to be opened only in the presence of Gregory Walsh. I called Walsh immediately. He agreed to meet me that evening, alone. When I arrived at his office after hours, he seemed unsurprised by what I'd brought. "Your father visited me 3 weeks before his death," Walsh said, plugging the USB drive into his computer. He was very specific about the timing of certain revelations. The video that loaded showed Dad sitting in what looked like a hotel room. He appeared thin, tired, but his eyes were clear and focused. "Marcus," the recording began, "if you're watching this, I'm gone. And I owe you an apology I'll never get to deliver in person. You were right about Marianne. You were right about everything. Walsh paused the video and opened the envelope. Inside were documents, dozens of them. Financial records, emails, text messages, medical records. Your father discovered the truth about 6 months ago, Walsh explained. Marianne's first husband didn't die of natural causes. The autopsy was inconclusive, but your father found evidence she'd been systematically poisoning him with antifreeze. Small doses over 18 months. My stomach dropped. She killed him? The statute of limitations had expired, and proving it would have been nearly impossible. But your father realized he was likely being poisoned too. He went to a toxicologist without telling anyone. The tests confirmed elevated levels of ethylene glycol in his system. Why didn't he go to the police? He wanted ironclad proof. He installed hidden cameras in the house, tracked every meal Marianne prepared, documented his symptoms. He also discovered she'd forged a new will 6 months into their marriage, cutting you out completely. The will I read yesterday, that was the forgery. Walsh resumed the video. Dad continued, I know you're angry with me, son. You have every right to be. I chose a beautiful woman and my pride over my own child. I'm sitting in this hotel room because I'm afraid to go home. Afraid she'll realize I know. But I needed time to build a case that would stick. Tears streamed down my face. Walsh handed me tissues without comment. I've documented everything, Dad's video went on. The financial fraud, the poisoning, her plans to kill me and inherit everything. She's done this before, Marcus. Her first husband, a boyfriend before that who died in a car accident that was never fully investigated. She's a predator, and I walked right into her trap because I was lonely and stupid. The video showed Dad pulling out a thick folder. All the evidence is with Gregory. The real will, the one I created after I married your mother, updated 3 years before I met Marianne, leaves 70% of my estate to you, 20% to charity, and 10% to a trust for future grandchildren. Marianne gets nothing. She never legally should have. Walsh stopped the video again. Your father died of acute ethylene glycol poisoning. The hospital coded it as a heart attack because that's how the poisoning presented. But he'd been documenting his symptoms for weeks. He knew he was running out of time. So why didn't he just leave her? Get treatment? He tried. But by the time he realized how dire his situation was, the damage was too extensive. His kidneys were failing. He had perhaps a few weeks left regardless. He chose to spend that time gathering evidence that would protect you and bring her to justice. The fight at the hospital, I said slowly. The way she accused me publicly, theater, Walsh confirmed. She needed everyone to believe you and your father were estranged, that his will cutting you out was legitimate. If people thought you had motive to contest, it would complicate her plans. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp. What happens now? Walsh smiled grimly. Now we spring the trap your father set. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Walsh contacted the police with Dad's evidence. Detectives opened an investigation into Marianne's previous husband's death and began examining Dad's medical records. Meanwhile, Walsh filed to invalidate the forged will and present the legitimate one for probate. Marianne's first response was predictable: outrage, threats, accusations that I'd coerced my dying father into changing his will. Tyler and Madison doubled down on social media, painting me as a greedy son contesting his father's wishes. Then the police arrested Marianne. The press conference was everything. Detectives laid out the evidence, the financial records showing Marianne had stolen over $300,000 from her first husband before his death, the autopsy results that were being re-examined, the hidden camera footage of her adding colorless liquid to Dad's drinks, the toxicology reports, Dad's video testimony. Tyler's face when reporters showed up at his door asking for comment was caught on camera. His confident smirk crumbled into panic. Madison deleted all her social media accounts. The trial took 8 months. I sat through every day of testimony, watching Marianne's mask slip further and further. The jury took 4 hours to find her guilty of first-degree murder, fraud, and a dozen other charges. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. But the first true twist came during the sentencing phase. Tyler stood up suddenly and said, "I'd like to make a statement." Everyone froze. Tyler's lawyer tried to pull him back down, but he shook him off. "I helped her," he said, voice shaking. "I helped my mother poison Richard Fletcher." The courtroom exploded. Tyler explained through tears that Marianne had convinced him Richard was abusive, that they needed to save her by making his death look natural. He'd been the one to purchase the antifreeze under a fake name. He'd helped her create the forged will using a signature stamp Marianne had made without Dad's knowledge. Madison started screaming, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Security removed her from the courtroom. Tyler received 15 years. Madison was charged with conspiracy after evidence emerged that she'd helped Marianne hide assets offshore, though she claimed ignorance of the murder plot. The jury believed her, barely. She got 5 years. But here's where things got truly twisted. During the asset recovery phase, Walsh's investigators discovered something that made my blood run cold. Mary Ann had been married 4 times, not twice as I believed. 2 other husbands, both deceased under suspicious circumstances. Both had left everything to her. Combined, she'd inherited over $12 million across 2 decades. One of those husbands, a man named Robert Chen, Mary Ann's second husband, had a daughter named Stephanie. Walsh tracked her down in Oregon. When we met, Stephanie was in her 40s, reserved and sad-eyed. "I tried to tell people," she said. "After Dad died, I knew something was wrong. But there was no proof, and Mary Ann was so good at playing the victim. She convinced everyone I was just a bitter stepdaughter angry about being cut out of the will. Stephanie and I became unlikely allies, both of us children of Mary Ann's victims. Together, we pushed for investigations into all her former husbands' deaths. The case grew into something massive, a serial killer who'd hidden in plain sight for 20 years, using marriage and poison as her weapons." Then came the second major twist. Walsh received an anonymous email with a video attachment. The email address was untraceable, but the video was explosive. Mary Ann meeting with a man named Derek Paulson 6 months before she married Dad. They were in a hotel room, and their conversation was damning. "This one's worth $8 million, minimum," Mary Ann said on the tape. "Maybe more if the business valuations come back high." Derek laughed. "And the son? You sure he's not going to be a problem?" "I'll handle the son. Drive a wedge between him and Richard, make sure there's a documented estrangement. When Richard dies, everyone will think the kid's just bitter about being cut out." "What's my cut this time?" "Same as always. 20%, paid out over 3 years from offshore accounts." Derek Paulson, it turned out, was Mary Ann's accomplice across multiple murders. He was the one who'd helped her acquire poisons, forge documents, and launder money. He'd been her partner for 15 years. Police arrested Derek within hours of receiving the video. Under interrogation, he cracked immediately and confessed to everything, implicating Mary Ann in 7 murders spanning 2 decades. 7. She'd killed 7 people. The news media went insane. The story became national, then international. The Black Widow Killer, they called her. Documentaries were greenlit. Book deals appeared. I turned them all down. But the twists weren't done yet. 4 months after Derek's arrest, I got a call from a woman named Linda Marsh. She was a journalist who'd been investigating Mary Ann independently for years after her own brother, Mary Ann's third husband, died under mysterious circumstances. "Marcus, there's something you need to know," Linda said. "Your father didn't just document Mary Ann's crimes. He orchestrated her downfall in ways even his lawyer doesn't know about." She sent me files, hundreds of pages of documents my father had compiled over his final months. He'd created fake email accounts, fed information to journalists anonymously, and even hired private investigators to track Mary Ann's every move. The video of Mary Ann and Derek? Dad had arranged for a private investigator to bug their hotel room months before his death. My father had known he was dying and used his final weeks to build an inescapable trap. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, every witness, he'd orchestrated it all. Even his death, in a way, was strategic. By dying in a hospital with witnesses, he'd ensured there would be medical records, toxicology samples, and a clear timeline that couldn't be disputed. "Your father was a brilliant man," Linda said. "He knew Mary Ann would try to frame you, so he made sure the evidence against her was so overwhelming that her narrative couldn't possibly stick. He protected you even after death." I sat in my father's office, now mine, as the business had come to me through the legitimate will, and cried for the first time since his death. Not tears of grief, but of gratitude and love. He'd never stopped being my father. Even when I thought he'd abandoned me, he'd been fighting for me. The final twist came during my deposition for the wrongful death lawsuit I'd filed against Mary Ann's estate. Mary Ann's defense attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Reeves, asked me a seemingly routine question. "Mr. Fletcher, when exactly did you first suspect Mary Ann Chen of wrongdoing?" I started to answer, then paused. Something about the way she'd asked made me reconsider. Walsh, sitting beside me, gave me a subtle nod to answer carefully. "I'm not sure I understand the question," I said. Patricia smiled thinly. "I'm asking when you first believed your stepmother was capable of murder." "After my father's death, when Mr. Walsh showed me the evidence." "Not before? You hired a private investigator to look into her background before your father even married her." This was dangerous territory. If they could prove I'd suspected Mary Ann from the beginning, they might argue I'd had time to poison Dad myself and frame her. It was absurd, but I could see the angle. "I had concerns about the speed of their relationship and the prenup demands," I said carefully. "I found irregularities in her first husband's death, but nothing that suggested murder. I was worried my father was being taken advantage of financially, not that his life was in danger." Patricia pressed harder, and I understood suddenly what was happening. Someone was feeding her information, helping her build a defense theory that I'd killed my father and framed Mary Ann. After the deposition, I told Walsh my concerns. He made some calls, and within a week, we had our answer. Tyler had been communicating with Patricia from prison, trying to create reasonable doubt for a potential appeal. He was claiming I'd manipulated the evidence, that I'd somehow coerced Dad into making that video. But Tyler had made a critical mistake. In his letters to Patricia, which were subpoenaed, he'd included details about the poisoning that only someone involved would know. Details that hadn't been made public. He'd been trying to frame me and accidentally provided more evidence of his own guilt. The appeal was denied before it even officially started. Tyler's sentence was extended for obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, investigators had identified 2 more victims in Marianne's past, men she'd dated briefly who died in accidents that, upon re-examination, looked suspiciously like homicides. The count was up to 9 potential victims. 9 lives ended for money. Emma and I got married 2 years after Dad's death. The wedding was small, just close friends and the few family members I still spoke to. Stephanie came, and Linda, and even Walsh, who'd become something of a friend through the ordeal. As I stood at the altar, I thought about Dad. About how he'd spent his final days fighting for me rather than raging against his fate. About how love, real love, means sacrifice without expectation of recognition. The estate was finally settled 3 years after Dad's death. After legal fees, taxes, and the donations to the charities Dad had specified, I inherited roughly $5 million in the business. I used a portion to establish a foundation in Dad's name that provides legal assistance to families investigating suspicious deaths of loved ones. Stephanie serves on the board. Marianne will die in prison. Tyler won't be released until he's nearly 50. Madison got out after 3 years and moved to Europe. We haven't spoken. But here's the final piece, the one that still takes my breath away. Last year, I was going through Dad's old files, organizing papers for the foundation, when I found a letter tucked inside an old ledger. It was dated 2 weeks before his death, addressed to me, but never sent. In it, Dad wrote, "Marcus, by the time you read this, you'll know everything. You'll know what Marianne did, what I did, and why. You'll probably be angry that I didn't tell you sooner, that I let you think I'd chosen her over you. But here's what you need to understand, I never stopped being your father. Not for 1 second. When you questioned Marianne, I got angry because you were right, and I couldn't admit it. My pride, the same pride that drove your mother crazy sometimes, wouldn't let me back down. But after you left, I started watching. Really watching. And I saw what you'd seen. I couldn't protect your mother from cancer. I couldn't save her, no matter how much I loved her or how much money I spent on treatments. I was helpless. But this I could do. I could protect you. I could make sure Marianne never hurt anyone else. I could turn my death into something that mattered. Son, you're going to do great things. You're going to live a full life with someone who deserves you. I hope it's Emma, she's wonderful, and you're going to make choices I never had the courage to make. You're going to be better than me. I'm not sorry for what I'm doing. I'm only sorry I won't be there to see the man you become. But I'll be watching somehow, somewhere. And I'll be proud. All my love, always and forever, Dad." P.S. The Mickey Mantle card is a reproduction I had made to hide the key. The real one is in a separate safe deposit box under your mother's maiden name at the bank where we opened your first savings account. I bought it the year you were born. It's worth about $200,000 now. It's yours. Everything I have is yours. It always was. I drove to the bank that afternoon. The card was there, pristine in its case, with a note from my mother dated 30 years ago, for Marcus's college fund, or whatever makes him happy. Love always, Mom. Dad had hidden Mom's most valuable possession to make sure I got it. Even the baseball cards were a test, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to truth. I donated the card to the Baseball Hall of Fame in both my parents' names. The money I would have received from selling it went to the foundation instead. Sometimes, late at night, I take out that last letter and read it again. I think about the complexity of love, how it can look like anger or silence or distance, but underneath, it remains constant. I think about Dad spending his final days not in fear or regret, but in purpose, fighting for me one last time. Marianne took his life, but she couldn't take what mattered. She couldn't take his love for me, or the legacy he built, or the justice he ensured would come. In the end, she lost everything while trying to steal everything. I won. Not because I wanted to, not because I sought victory, but because Dad made sure I would. He turned his own death into a final gift, the gift of truth, safety, and vindication. The foundation has helped 12 families so far get justice for their loved ones. 3 cases resulted in murder convictions that might never have happened without our legal and investigative support. 12 families who have answers now. 12 families who don't have to wonder. That's Dad's real legacy. Not the money, not the business, but the lives protected and the truth uncovered. I visit his grave every month. Mom's too, they're buried side by side. I tell them about Emma, about the work we're doing, about the lives we're changing. I tell them about the letters we get from families thanking us for giving them closure. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months after I found Dad's final letter, Walsh called me with news that sent chills down my spine. "Marcus, we need to meet. Today if possible. There's been a development." I drove to his office, my mind racing through possibilities. When I arrived, Walsh wasn't alone. A federal agent named Rebecca Torres sat across from him, a thick file on the desk between them. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, "your father's case has opened doors we never expected. We've been investigating financial crimes related to the money Marianne Chen laundered over the years. What we found goes far beyond a serial killer covering her tracks." She opened the file and spread out documents, bank records, corporate filings, wire transfers spanning multiple countries. Marianne wasn't working alone, and Derek Paulson wasn't her only partner. She was part of a larger network. My mouth went dry. What kind of network? Marriage fraud and murder for hire, operating internationally for at least 25 years. We've identified connections to at least 15 suspicious deaths across 6 countries. Women, and a few men, who marry wealthy targets, kill them, inherit, and move on. They share tactics, help each other establish false identities, and launder money through interconnected offshore accounts. Walsh leaned forward. Your father stumbled onto something much bigger than he realized. Some of the financial trails he documented led us to other members of this network. How many others? Agent Torres met my eyes. So far, we've identified 12 active operators. We've made 4 arrests in the past month. Your father's evidence didn't just take down his killer, it's dismantling an entire criminal enterprise. The room spun. Dad had thought he was protecting me from one murderer. Instead, he'd exposed a conspiracy that had killed dozens of people. There's more, Torres continued. One of the arrested individuals, a woman named Clarissa Vance, wants to make a deal. She's offering testimony about the network in exchange for a reduced sentence. And she specifically mentioned Marianne. What about her? Clarissa claims Marianne was being groomed to take over as the network's coordinator. She was supposed to retire from active killing after your father and recruit new members. Your father's death was meant to be her masterpiece, the one that set her up for life so she could focus on teaching others. I felt sick. If Dad hadn't discovered the truth, Marianne would have spent the rest of her life helping others murder their spouses. Over the following weeks, I cooperated with federal investigators, providing everything Walsh and I had compiled. The case expanded exponentially. International law enforcement agencies got involved. News coverage exploded again, but this time the focus shifted from one black widow to an entire web of killers. Then came a development I never saw coming. Agent Torres called me 6 months into the federal investigation. "We need you to testify before a grand jury. But there's something you should know first. We've arrested someone connected to the network who has information about your mother." My blood ran cold. My mother? She died of cancer. There's no connection. We don't think there's a connection to her death, Torres interrupted. But this person claims to have information about an incident that occurred 3 months before your mother passed away. Something your father apparently investigated privately. I met with Torres and Walsh the next day. They showed me documents I'd never seen, reports from a private investigator Dad had hired years ago, dated 7 years prior. The investigation focused on a car accident my mother had been in. I remembered it vaguely. She'd been sideswiped by another vehicle on the highway. Minor injuries, but it had shaken her. Your father suspected it wasn't an accident, Torres explained. The other driver was a woman named Helen Cartwright. She died 2 years later in what was ruled a suicide. But Helen was connected to this network. We think she was conducting surveillance on your mother, possibly planning something. Planning what? We believe someone in the network had been hired to kill your mother. Your father had built a successful business, had substantial life insurance on both himself and your mother. Helen was supposed to make it look like an accident, but she failed. The car accident was her attempt. Your mother swerved at the last second, avoided the worst of it. I couldn't breathe. Someone had tried to kill my mother years before cancer took her. Who hired Helen? Torres exchanged glances with Walsh. We're still investigating, but we have a theory. Did your father have any business partners who might have benefited from his death? The answer hit me like a freight train. Philip Grayson. Philip had been Dad's business partner for 15 years. They'd built the company together from nothing. But 8 years ago, a year before Mom's accident, they'd had a falling out over company direction. Dad bought Philip out for $3 million, which Philip claimed was far below the company's true value. He'd sued, lost, and I hadn't heard his name mentioned in years. We're looking into Grayson now, Torres confirmed. If he hired the network to kill your parents, he would have inherited control of the company as the original co-founder with a reversion clause in your father's corporate documents. After your mother's death from cancer, those documents were updated, cutting Grayson out completely. But at the time of the car accident, he stood to gain everything. The investigation into Philip Grayson took another 8 months. Forensic accountants traced payments from his accounts to known network members. Encrypted messages were recovered from old hard drives. Finally, they had enough to arrest him. Philip, now in his 70s and retired in Florida, broke down during interrogation. He confessed to hiring Helen Cartwright to kill my mother, hoping the grief would destroy Dad's focus and Philip could swoop in to reclaim control of the company. When the car accident failed and Mom's cancer diagnosis came shortly after, Philip had called off the hit, assuming nature would do his work for him. But Philip's confession included another bombshell. After Dad bought him out, Philip had stayed in touch with Helen. When Philip heard years later that Dad was dating someone new, he'd mentioned it to Helen. Helen, it turned out, had introduced Dad to Marianne. The setup had been deliberate from the start. Marianne had targeted Dad specifically because Philip had flagged him as a wealthy widower with a strained relationship with his son, the perfect mark. Your father was doomed the moment Philip made that introduction, Torres told me. Marianne had been watching him for months before they accidentally met at that charity event. I remember Dad telling me about meeting Marianne. A fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, a chance encounter at the bar. She'd seemed so charming, so interested in his work. It had all been calculated. Philip Grayson was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and multiple counts of fraud. At his trial, he showed no remorse. Richard stole my company, he spat during testimony. He owed me. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Philip received 25 years. He'd die in prison. But the revelations weren't finished. During Philip's trial, his attorney tried to argue that my father had known about Philip's connection to Marianne before he died. They claimed Dad had used this knowledge to deliberately marry Marianne, creating an elaborate sting operation that endangered himself intentionally. If proven, it might have reduced Philip's culpability, arguing Dad had assumed the risk. Walsh and I knew this was absurd, but we needed proof. We went back through every document Dad had left behind, searching for evidence of when he discovered Philip's involvement. Emma found it. She'd been helping me organize Dad's storage unit, and in a box of old business files, she discovered a journal Dad had kept during his marriage to Mom. One entry, dated 2 months before the car accident, mentioned Philip acting strangely. Philip called today, asking about life insurance policies. Dad had written. Wanted to know how much coverage we carried, whether we'd updated beneficiaries recently. Seemed like an odd conversation. Made me uncomfortable. Going to have someone look into his finances, something feels off. The next entries detailed Dad's growing suspicion that Philip was planning something. He'd hired investigators, discovered Philip's gambling debts and shady business dealings. Then came the car accident, and Dad's suspicions crystallized into certainty. He'd spent years trying to prove Philip's involvement but could never find hard evidence. Until Marianne entered his life, and pieces started clicking into place. A later journal entry, dated 4 months into Dad's relationship with Marianne, revealed the moment Dad realized the connection. Saw Philip having lunch with a woman today. Looked like her, or someone related. Asked around, Philip's been seen with several women matching Marianne's description over the years. Called my investigator. This can't be coincidence. Marianne is connected to Philip somehow. Which means I'm not dating her by chance. I'm prey. Dad had known. Not from the beginning, but early enough. And instead of running, he'd started documenting everything, building a case not just against Marianne but against the entire network she was part of. He'd known catching her meant catching them all, including Philip. My father had sacrificed himself to burn down an empire of killers. The journal ended any defense Philip's attorneys tried to mount. Dad hadn't willingly assumed risk, he'd discovered a conspiracy and chose to expose it, knowing the cost. The judge called it one of the most extraordinary acts of courage and selflessness I've witnessed in 30 years on the bench. Walsh and I presented the journal to Agent Torres, who used it to strengthen cases against the remaining network members. 2 more arrests followed. Then 3 more. The network was collapsing. But one member remained elusive, the coordinator, the person who'd run the entire operation for decades. Clarissa Vance claimed she'd never met them, only communicated through encrypted channels. None of the arrested members could identify them. Finding the coordinator became my obsession. The Foundation's resources went toward helping investigators track down leads. I hired additional private investigators. Emma worried I was becoming consumed by it, but I couldn't let go. This person had orchestrated Mom's attempted murder, had sent Marianne to kill Dad, had destroyed countless families. 18 months after Marianne's conviction, we got our break. A forensic analyst reviewing the encrypted communications noticed a pattern in the coordinator's messages, specific phrases, unusual word choices. She cross-referenced them against writing samples from thousands of potential suspects. One match stood out, a best-selling true crime author named Victoria Ashland. Victoria had written extensively about unsolved murders, cold cases, and criminal psychology. Her books were acclaimed, she was a frequent television commentator, and she'd built a career on understanding killers. Because she was one. FBI agents arrested Victoria at a book signing in Chicago. In her home office, they found detailed files on every victim, every operator in the network, and records going back 35 years. Victoria had started the network as a young woman after murdering her own wealthy husband. She'd spent decades refining the system, recruiting others, and writing books about murder to stay current on investigative techniques. Her arrest made international headlines. The sheer audacity of a serial killer coordinator hiding as a true crime expert captured public imagination. Publishers pulled her books from shelves. Streaming services canceled planned documentaries. But Victoria's capture revealed one final, devastating twist. In her files, investigators found notes about potential targets. Future marks. People the network had been watching, planning to approach. One folder was labeled Secondary Fletcher Target. Inside were photos and information about me. Agent Torres delivered this news in person, her face grim. After your father died, Victoria identified you as a potential target. Young, soon to inherit millions, no other family. They were planning to have someone approach you at a grief support group, build a relationship, and eventually marry you. My hands shook as I looked through the file. Photos of me leaving Dad's funeral, surveillance shots of me at the grocery store, at the gym, having coffee with Emma. They'd been watching me for months. Who was supposed to approach me? Torres pulled out a photo. A woman I didn't recognize, attractive, probably in her early 30s. Her name is Jennifer Ross. She's already in custody, arrested last month in connection with the murder of a businessman in Seattle. She was supposed to make contact with you next month at a grief counseling session. We've verified she'd enrolled in the same group you attend. I felt violated, exposed. If Dad hadn't built his case, if the investigation hadn't unfolded as it did, I would have been next. Some woman would have pretended to understand my grief, would have wormed her way into my life, and eventually would have killed me for money. Emma held me that night as I processed how close I'd come to repeating Dad's fate. Your father saved you twice, she whispered. Once by catching Marianne, and once by stopping them before they could get to you. Victoria Ashland went to trial 2 years after her arrest. I testified about finding my name in her files, about the surveillance photos, about the depth of this conspiracy that had touched my family twice. The trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming, DNA connecting her to 2 murders she'd personally committed, financial records showing her taking a cut from every network killing, communications proving she'd orchestrated dozens of deaths. The jury convicted her on 43 counts of murder and conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to life without parole, consecutive sentences totaling over 900 years. Victoria showed no emotion as the verdict was read. She simply smiled slightly, as if she'd expected nothing less. In her final statement before sentencing, she looked directly at me. Your father was remarkable, she said. Most people, when they realize they're dying, focus on themselves. He focused on destruction, our destruction. It was almost admirable, in a professional sense. He beat us. That rarely happens. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to a monster who saw murder as a profession. With Victoria's arrest and the network's collapse, the Foundation's work took on new meaning. We weren't just helping families investigate suspicious deaths, we were preventing future victims. Agent Torres partnered with us to create educational programs about marriage fraud and financial predation. We trained law enforcement to recognize patterns associated with network killings. Stephanie joined the Foundation full-time, and together we built something Dad would have been proud of. In 5 years, we helped solve 32 cold cases. 13 of them turned out to be network murders that had gone undetected. 13 families finally got answers. But personal peace remained elusive for me. The surveillance photos haunted me. Knowing I'd been targeted, watched, planned for, it changed how I saw the world. I became hypervigilant, suspicious of strangers, unable to trust easily. Emma suggested therapy, and I finally agreed. Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation to Marianne, thankfully, specialized in trauma survivors. She helped me process the complex grief of losing Dad, the betrayal I felt over his apparent rejection, and the terror of realizing I'd been marked for death. Your father's sacrifice was immense, Dr. Chen said during one session. But so is your burden. You're carrying his legacy, his fight, his unfinished business. That's too much for one person. She was right. I'd been trying to be Dad, to finish what he started, to fight every battle. But I wasn't him. I didn't need to be. Slowly, I learned to separate my life from his mission. The Foundation continued its work, but I stepped back from day-to-day operations. Stephanie became executive director. I remained on the board, contributed strategically, but focused on building my own life. Emma and I bought a house outside the city, away from the memories. We adopted a dog, a golden retriever we named Charlie. We planted a garden. We did normal things that normal people do. 3 years after Victoria's conviction, Emma told me she was pregnant. I stood in our kitchen, holding the positive test, tears streaming down my face. A baby. New life, after so much death. A future that wasn't defined by the past. Our daughter was born on a crisp October morning. We named her Sarah, after my mother. When I held her for the first time, something shifted inside me. This tiny person represented hope, continuation, everything good that survives evil. I thought about Dad, about how he'd fought to protect me so I could have this moment. About how his sacrifice rippled forward, creating space for new life, new love, new beginnings. Agent Torres came to visit when Sarah was 2 months old. She'd retired from the FBI and was writing a book about the network investigation. "I wanted you to know," she said, holding Sarah gently, "we've closed every case connected to Victoria's network. 47 convictions total. We estimate the network killed at least 63 people over 35 years. Your father's evidence was the key to all of it. 63 people. 63 families destroyed. And Dad had stopped it, even though stopping it meant dying." "There's something else," Torres continued. "We found a recording Victoria made shortly before her arrest. She didn't know we'd recovered it, it was on an encrypted server we cracked. In it, she talks about your father." She played the audio on her phone. Victoria's voice, calm and measured. "Richard Fletcher was the one that got away." "No, that's not accurate. He was the one who didn't just get away, but dismantled everything we'd built. I've been doing this for 35 years, and he's the only mark who ever figured it out in time to matter. Marianne was one of my best, and he outmaneuvered her completely. He was dying, poisoned, weeks from death, and he still orchestrated a perfect trap. I respect that, even as it infuriates me. He was playing chess while we thought we were playing checkers." The recording ended. Torres looked at me seriously. "Your father wasn't just brave. He was brilliant. He saw the whole picture, understood the scope, and built a case that couldn't fail. Everything we've accomplished in breaking this network traces back to him." After Torres left, I sat in Sarah's nursery, watching her sleep. I thought about legacy, about how Dad's final act had saved not just me, but dozens of other potential victims. How many children would grow up with parents who might have been killed if the network had continued? How many families stayed intact because Dad had burned it all down? I'm victorious not because I defeated anyone personally, but because I survived to build something new. I survived to love Emma, to raise Sarah, to help other families through the foundation. I survived because Dad made sure I would. The baseball cards still hang in my office, next to photos of Mom, Dad, Emma, and Sarah. The 1952 Mickey Mantle reproduction remains my most treasured possession, worthless to everyone except me. Sometimes Sarah reaches for it, fascinated by the colors. When she's old enough, I'll tell her about her grandfather. About how he loved so deeply that he turned his death into a weapon against evil. About how real heroism isn't always loud or obvious, sometimes it's quiet, strategic, and complete. I'll tell her about the network, about the people Dad helped save, about the foundation that continues his work. I'll teach her to be vigilant but not paranoid, trusting but not naive. I'll show her that love and justice aren't opposing forces, they're the same force, expressed differently. And I'll make sure she knows that she's here, living and laughing and growing, because her grandfather loved me enough to die protecting not just me, but the future I could build. That's victory. Not the courtroom convictions, not the headlines, not the foundation's successes. Victory is Sarah's laugh, Emma's smile, the life we've built on the foundation of Dad's sacrifice. Marianne and Victoria and Philip and all the others, they lost everything. Not just their freedom, but their very purpose. They spent decades believing that manipulation and murder were paths to power and wealth. In the end, they got prison cells and infamy. Meanwhile, I got everything they tried to take: family, love, purpose, peace. The trap Dad built didn't just catch killers. It protected every good thing worth protecting. And that trap continues working, even now, through the Foundation's efforts, through the awareness we've raised, through the lives we continue to save. I visit Dad's grave with Sarah now. She's too young to understand, but I tell him about her anyway. About her first smile, her first word, the way she reaches for Emma with such trust and love. "You did it, Dad," I tell him. "You saved us. All of us. Not just me, but everyone who came after. You won." The victories aren't always obvious. They don't always come with ceremonies or recognition. Sometimes victory is simply waking up another day, holding your daughter, kissing your wife, and knowing that evil tried its best and failed. That's the victory Dad gave me. And it's the victory I'll pass on to Sarah, and she'll pass on to her children, and the ripple will continue forward, forever outpacing the darkness that tried to consume us. In the end, love didn't just win. Love demolished everything that stood against it. Love built a fortress that no amount of evil could breach. Love turned death into life, tragedy into purpose, loss into legacy. And that love continues, every single day, in every choice I make, every family the Foundation helps, every moment I spend with the people who matter. Marianne thought she was the clever one. Victoria thought she was untouchable. Philip thought he deserved revenge. They were all wrong. Dad was the clever one. Love was untouchable. And justice deserves everything. Love is the most powerful force in human existence, not romantic love alone, but the deep, sacrificial love that asks nothing in return. The love of a parent for a child, of a friend for a friend, of one human being for another, simply because they exist and matter. This love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or perfect words. Sometimes it works in silence, in the background, making moves we won't understand until much later. Sometimes it looks like anger, like distance, like rejection, but underneath, it's building something stronger than stone. My father taught me that truth isn't always immediate, that justice sometimes takes time, and that real love never stops fighting, even when the fight seems lost. If you're reading this and wondering whether someone truly loves you, look deeper than their words or their recent actions. Look at what they've built for you, what they've protected you from, what they've sacrificed that you may never fully know about. Love endures. Love protects. Love wins, maybe not today, maybe not obviously, but eventually, inevitably, love wins. Hold on to that hope, and let it guide you through whatever darkness you face. Story 2. My stepdaughter's principal called me in and said, "Your son has been bullying her relentlessly. We're expelling him." I looked at my 14-year-old son's face. He was crying, saying it wasn't true. My stepdaughter smirked behind the principal's back. My wife said, "Admit what you did." I stared at my son and said, "Pack your things. You're going to military school." He looked at me like I'd stabbed him. That was 3 years ago. Last night, my stepdaughter's best friend sent me a video recording that made my wife collapse. My son hasn't answered any of my 340 calls, and my stepdaughter just got a letter from the police. "Mr. Harrison, I need you to understand the severity of what's been happening here." Principal Matthews folded her hands across the desk, her expression carved from stone. "Madison has shown us bruises. Text messages. Screenshots of harassment that would make your stomach turn." My wife Sarah gripped my arm so hard I felt her nails through my shirt. Madison sat in the corner chair, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders shaking. My son Tyler stood beside me, his face drained of color, hands trembling. "Dad, I swear. Enough." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "The evidence is right there. Principal Matthews has documented everything." I looked at the printed screenshots spread across the desk. Vile messages. Threats. All from Tyler's phone number. My chest tightened. Tyler grabbed my sleeve. "Please, Dad. Someone's setting me up. I would never, Madison and we were friends. I helped her with her algebra homework last week. Why would I? Friends don't send messages like this." Principal Matthews tapped one of the papers. "Friends don't push girls downstairs." I didn't push her. She fell. I was 10 feet away in the hallway. Madison let out a theatrical sob. Sarah rushed to her side, wrapping protective arms around her stepdaughter. The girl I'd known for 2 years, who'd moved into our home after I married Sarah. Madison, who'd seemed sweet at first. Who called me dad within 3 months. Who'd made Tyler laugh at dinner with her impressions of their teachers. "We have 3 witnesses who saw Tyler standing at the top of the stairs right after Madison fell," Principal Matthews continued. "She has a fractured wrist. Do you understand what this means? We're talking about physical assault on top of sustained psychological harassment." No. Tyler's voice rose to a desperate pitch. "Those kids hate me because I wouldn't let them cheat off my physics test. They're lying. All of them." "Tyler." I put my hand on his shoulder, and he flinched. My own son flinched from my touch. Something inside me cracked, but I couldn't let it show. Not here. Not in front of Sarah, who was already looking at me like she was measuring whether I'd choose my son over her daughter. "Dad, please. You have to believe me." Principal Matthews pulled out another document. "This is Madison's medical report from last month. The bruises on her arms? She finally told the school counselor they were from Tyler grabbing her in the cafeteria. We have cafeteria footage." "Show me." The words came out harder than I intended. The principal turned her laptop around. Grainy footage showed the cafeteria. Tyler walking past a table. Madison suddenly jerking backward, her arm extended. Tyler nowhere near her. "He grabbed her right before this clip starts," Sarah said. "Obviously." I watched it 3 more times. Something felt wrong. Madison's movement looked strange, theatrical. But Sarah's eyes were boring into the side of my face, and Madison was crying harder now, and Principal Matthews was talking about police involvement if we didn't handle this appropriately. "He needs serious intervention," Principal Matthews said. "Counseling at minimum. But honestly, Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison, given the escalation pattern we've documented, I believe Tyler needs a more structured environment." "Military school," Sarah said immediately. "My cousin's son went to one in Virginia. Turned his whole life around." Tyler's breath came in short gasps. Dad, look at me." You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were wild with panic and betrayal. The same eyes that had looked up at me when he was 6, asking if Mom was coming back from the hospital. She hadn't. Cancer took her fast and mean. I'd raised Tyler alone for 5 years before meeting Sarah. 5 years of father-son breakfasts and homework at the kitchen table and teaching him to throw a curveball in the backyard. But I also saw the evidence. The screenshots. The witnesses. The medical reports. The video footage. What kind of father ignores all that? What kind of father believes his son could do such things? Pack your things, I heard myself say. You're going to military school. The light died in Tyler's eyes. He took a step back, nearly stumbling. You don't believe me. You don't believe me. His voice went flat. Dead. You're choosing them. Tyler, if you did these things, you need help. If you didn't, I didn't. Each word dropped like a stone. But you'll never know that now, will you? He walked out. Didn't slam the door. Just walked out quietly, and somehow that was worse. Madison's crying stopped the moment the door closed. Just stopped. I caught it from the corner of my eye, the way her shoulders went still, the tissue lowering from her face. But when I turned to look directly at her, she was dabbing her eyes again. Thank you for believing me, she whispered to Sarah. I told myself I imagined the smile at the edge of her lips. The military academy in Virginia was called Ridgemont Preparatory. Strict discipline, structured environment, counseling included. Cost a fortune. Drained half my savings account. Tyler refused to speak to me during the drive there. Refused to look at me during check-in. Refused to respond when I said goodbye. Give him time, Sarah said on the drive home. He'll realize you did this for his own good. Madison sat in the back seat, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone. Smiling at something on her screen. Weeks passed. Tyler wouldn't take my calls. The academy coordinator assured me this was normal for adjustment periods. He was attending classes, following rules, seeing the counselor. Some boys need to hit rock bottom before they can build themselves back up, the coordinator said. I lay awake at night replaying that scene in the principal's office. Tyler's face. His voice. The absolute conviction in his denial. But then I'd remember the evidence. The texts from his phone. The witnesses. The medical reports. How could all of that be fake? You're brooding again, Sarah said one night, rolling over in bed. Tyler's getting the help he needs. Madison's thriving now that he's gone. She made the honor roll. Did I tell you that? That's great. You don't sound like you think it's great. I'm happy for her. I miss my son. Your son hurt my daughter. Her voice went cold. I know it's hard to accept, but you saw the proof. Sometimes we don't really know our own children. Maybe she was right. Tyler and I had been close, but teenage years change kids. Hormones, peer pressure, stress. Maybe I'd missed warning signs. Maybe I'd been a terrible father, blind to my own son's cruelty. Or maybe I was a terrible father for doubting him. 6 months into Tyler's time at Ridgemont, Madison asked if her best friend Chloe could spend more time at our house. She's having trouble at home, Madison explained over dinner. Her parents fight constantly. She needs a safe space. Of course, Sarah said immediately. Any friend of Madison's is welcome here. Chloe started showing up 3-4 times a week. Quiet girl, dark circles under her eyes, nervous energy. She barely made eye contact with me. Always seemed to be watching Madison, though. Studying her like you'd study something dangerous. One afternoon, I came home early from work and heard crying from Madison's room. I knocked. Everything okay? Fine. Madison's voice, cheerful and bright. But I'd heard 2 people crying. I was sure of it. Chloe? You all right? Silence. Then Madison opened the door, smiling. Chloe had to go home. It's just me. I looked past her. Chloe sat on the bed, face blotchy and red, mascara streaked. She met my eyes for just a second, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. Fear. Raw, animal fear. Mr. Harrison, Madison said, did you need something? No. No. She closed the door. Gently. Carefully. Like she was sealing a tomb. I stood in the hallway, pulse racing. What had I just seen? But then Sarah came home, and dinner needed cooking, and a work email needed answering, and the moment slipped away like water through my fingers. Tyler had been gone for a year when his letters stopped. He'd been writing once a month, short, cold letters that never mentioned the bullying accusations, never asked about life at home. Just updates about classes and drills and weather. I'd written back every week, long rambling letters trying to explain, to apologize, to connect. He never acknowledged them. But at least he'd been writing. Then nothing. 2 months of silence. I called Ridgemont. Tyler's doing exceptionally well, the coordinator said. Top of his class academically. Leadership roles in several activities. The counselor says he's made remarkable progress. Can I speak to him? He's requested no family contact for the time being. The counselor supports this boundary as part of his healing process. Healing from what? From me sending him away for something he might not have done? A pause. Mr. Harrison, the evidence was quite conclusive. Tyler is working through accepting responsibility for his actions. Contact from you might derail that progress. I hung up feeling like I'd swallowed glass. Sarah found me staring at Tyler's last letter that night. You need to let him go, she said. He's becoming a better person. Don't interfere with that. What if we were wrong? We weren't. Firm. Absolute. I know it's painful, but you did the right thing. Madison is finally happy. Look at her. Madison was indeed thriving. Honor roll every semester. Lead in the school play. Student council. She'd grown beautiful too, confident, poised, popular. Everything a teenage girl should be. So why did I feel sick every time I looked at her? Tyler turned 17 at Ridgemont. I sent a birthday card and a check. Both came back unopened, returned to sender written in handwriting that wasn't Tyler's. I sat in my car in the office parking lot that day and cried for the first time since my wife died. Not quiet tears. Gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping. My son hated me. Maybe rightfully so. I'd chosen a stepdaughter's word over his. I'd sent him away. I'd done everything wrong, and I couldn't figure out how to make it right. My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, Madison's recital tonight at 7. Don't forget. I drove home. Showered. Put on a dress shirt. Smiled at Madison when she twirled in her recital dress. Drove to the school auditorium. Sat in the dark and watched her dance beautifully. Applauded with everyone else. Died a little more inside. The video arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a random Tuesday. I was already in bed, Sarah asleep beside me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Text message, Mr. Harrison. You need to see this. I can't stay silent anymore. I'm so sorry. Chloe. Below the text, a video file. I got out of bed, went to the bathroom, closed the door, and pressed play. The video was dark at first, just voices. Madison's voice. And another girl, Chloe. I don't want to do this anymore, Chloe said. She sounded terrified. You don't have a choice. Madison's voice was different. Colder than I'd ever heard it. You're in this with me. You sent those texts from Tyler's number. You gave the statements to the principal. You convinced Aiden and Marcus to lie about seeing Tyler at the top of the stairs. But he didn't do anything. Tyler was always nice to me. He didn't deserve. I don't care what he deserves. He was in my way. In your way? Madison, you got him sent away. His dad won't even speak to him anymore. Good. My mom finally has the attention she deserves. No stepson competing for it. No divided loyalty. Just us. The way it should be. This is sick. I'm going to tell. A laugh. Sharp and cruel. Tell who? The evidence was perfect. My bruises were real, I made sure of that. Hurt like hell doing them myself, but whatever. The texts came from his phone. The witnesses are on record. Tyler's at military school confessing to everything in counseling sessions. Nobody will believe you. He's not confessing. He still says he didn't do it. For now. People crack eventually. The counselor told my mom that Tyler's starting to show signs of accepting responsibility. That's therapists speak for breaking. Give it another year, and he'll believe he did it too. Gaslighting isn't just for relationships. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The video continued. Besides, if you tell, I'll just say you're lying because Tyler's your little crush. Remember when you asked him to the spring dance freshman year? Everyone remembers. They'll say you're making things up to defend him. And I'll show everyone those pictures from the party last year. You know the ones. You said you deleted those. I lied. I lie a lot, Chloe. You should know that by now. I hate you. No, you're afraid of me. There's a difference. Now help me with my chemistry homework. That's what best friends do. The video ended. I sat on the bathroom floor, phone clutched in my hand, gasping for air. The tile was cold against my back. The ceiling spun. Everything I'd done to Tyler. Everything I'd believed. All of it built on lies crafted by a teenage girl who'd played everyone with sociopathic precision. I'd destroyed my relationship with my son for this. I pressed play again. Listened to the whole thing twice more, making sure I hadn't imagined it. Making sure it was real. It was real. I opened the bathroom door. Sarah was sitting up in bed, looking at her phone, face pale as bone in the lamplight. Chloe sent you the video too, I said. Sarah's phone slipped from her fingers. This can't be real. Madison wouldn't listen to it. No. No, there has to be an explanation. Maybe it's taken out of context. Maybe they were joking. Teenage girls joke about. Listen to the video, Sarah. She picked up her phone with shaking hands. I heard Madison's voice, tinny and distant from across the room. Watched Sarah's face crumble. Watched her realize that her daughter had methodically destroyed an innocent boy's life and felt nothing about it. Oh goodness. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth. Oh me goodness, what did we do? We believed her. We believed all of it. My voice sounded hollow. I sent my son away. He begged me to believe him, and I chose her instead. We had evidence. The texts, the witnesses. She faked the texts. She coerced the witnesses. She bruised herself. You heard her. She planned the whole thing. Sarah started crying. Not pretty tears, ugly, choking sobs. Why would she do this? Why would Madison do something so cruel? Because Tyler was in her way. She wanted you to herself. No divided attention. No stepbrother. I felt weirdly calm now. Shock, probably. And she's good at this. Scarily good. That video sounds like someone who's been manipulating people her whole life. What do? We call Tyler. We call Ridgemont. We get him home. We confess everything. We grovel. We beg his forgiveness even though we don't deserve it. And Madison? I looked toward her closed bedroom door down the hall. That video is evidence of conspiracy to file false reports, defamation, possibly witness tampering. Chloe wouldn't have sent it unless she was ready to testify to everything. Madison's 17. Old enough to face legal consequences. Sarah's crying intensified. She's my daughter. My baby. She's a sociopath who destroyed a boy's life for convenience. What happens when someone else gets in her way? A college roommate? A boyfriend? A coworker? My hands clenched into fists. This ends now. I grabbed my phone and started calling Tyler. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Again. Again. 340 calls over the next 6 hours. He never answered. At 6 a.m., I stopped calling and started the 2-hour drive to Ridgemont Preparatory. Sarah stayed home. Someone needs to be here when Madison wakes up, she said, but I knew she just couldn't face Tyler yet. Couldn't look him in the eye after what we'd done. I made the drive in 85 minutes, breaking every speed limit. The coordinator met me in the lobby. Mr. Harrison, Tyler's actually not on campus right now. He's on an approved overnight trip with the junior leadership group. They won't be back until. Where is he? I can't disclose the specific location of student activities without. I played the video on my phone. Made him listen to the whole thing. His face went gray. Oh my goodness. All this time, we've been counseling him to accept responsibility for something he didn't do. We've been. Oh my goodness. Where is my son? He gave me the address of a leadership retreat center 30 miles away. I was back in my car before he could say anything else. The retreat center was a collection of rustic cabins in the woods. I found the coordinator's cabin, pounded on the door. A man in his 50s answered, annoyed until he saw my face. Tyler Harrison. Where is he? Sir, you can't just. 3 years ago, my son was falsely accused of bullying. I sent him here. I didn't believe him when he said he was innocent. Last night, I got proof that everything was a lie. Every single thing. Now where is my son? The coordinator's expression shifted. The Harrison kid. Yeah, he's here. But Mr. Harrison, you should know, Tyler's been different lately. Closed off. He doesn't talk about family. When we ask about his home life, he just says he doesn't have one anymore. Each word was a knife. Which cabin? 7. But he's probably down at the lake. That's where he goes in the mornings. To think. I found Tyler sitting on the end of a dock, feet dangling over the water. 17 now, taller than me, shoulders broadened from military-style training. Hair cut military short. Posture straight even sitting down. He looked like a young man. Not the 14-year-old boy I'd betrayed. Tyler. He went rigid. Didn't turn around. You shouldn't be here. I know. I know I have no right. But I need you to listen. 3 years too late for that. Tyler, please, did she finally confess? He still didn't turn. Madison? Did she get bored of the game and admit it was all fake? My breath caught. How did you? I'm not stupid, Dad. I never was. Now he turned, and his eyes were ice. I knew from the start that Madison framed me. The evidence was too perfect. Too convenient. The witnesses who hated me all suddenly remembering the same story. The text that supposedly came from my phone even though I'd never sent anything like that in my life. The bruises that appeared right before a big accusation. But you never said. I said it repeatedly. You didn't believe me. He stood up, and I saw how much taller he'd gotten. You know what the worst part was? Not being sent away. Not even the false accusations. It was watching you choose to believe her over me. Your own son. The kid you raised alone for 5 years after mom died. I wasn't even surprised you did it. Madison had been working on Sarah for months, making sure Sarah saw me as a threat to their relationship. I saw it happening. I tried to tell you. You said I was being paranoid. I'm sorry. Tyler, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 3 years. Sorry doesn't undo the counseling sessions where therapists tried to make me accept responsibility for things I didn't do. Sorry doesn't fix the reputation I'll never get back. His voice stayed level. Controlled. Emotionless. Why are you here now? I showed him the video. He watched it without expression. When it ended, he handed back my phone. Chloe finally grew a spine. Good for her. Tyler, we have evidence now. We can get you home. We can? Home? He laughed, bitter and sharp. I don't have a home. I have 4 months left here, then I've got a full scholarship to West Point. After that, the Army. That's my home now. Don't say that. Please. I know I failed you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But you're my son. You're all I have left of. My voice broke. You're all I have left of her. Of your mother. And I threw that away because I was a coward. Because I was afraid of losing Sarah. Because I didn't want to believe my new stepdaughter was capable of that level of manipulation. Congratulations on your wake-up call. 3 years late. He started walking back toward the cabins. Go home, Dad. Go deal with your family drama. I'm not part of it anymore. Tyler, wait. He turned, and for just a second, the ice cracked. Pain flashed across his face, raw and bleeding. Do you know what it's like to have your own father look at you like you're a monster? To have him believe you're capable of hurting someone? To be completely alone because the one person who's supposed to believe in you unconditionally decided you weren't worth the benefit of the doubt? You don't know anything. You made your choice. I've made mine. I don't need a father who only believes me when there's video evidence. I needed one who knew me well enough to see through obvious lies. You weren't that father. He walked away. I stood on that dock, watching him disappear into the trees, and felt the last piece of my heart shatter. I drove home in a fog. Called Chloe's number. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Harrison? Thank you for sending that video. But I need you to do something else. I need you to go to the police. Tell them everything. Madison has to face consequences for this. Silence. Then, quietly, I already did. This morning. I gave them the video and a written statement. They said they'd be contacting Madison and her mother today. Why now? Why after 3 years? Because yesterday, Madison told me she was going to do it again. There's a girl in her AP history class who's competing with her for valedictorian. Madison showed me her plan, how she'd frame this girl for cheating, get her expelled. She had texts ready to send, screenshots doctored, witnesses prepped. It was Tyler all over again. Chloe's voice shook. I couldn't let her destroy another person. And I couldn't keep living with what we did to Tyler. I've had nightmares every night for 3 years. Every night. I see his face when the principal accused him. When you sent him away. Does Madison know you went to the police? Not yet. But she will soon. Be careful. If she's as dangerous as that video suggests, she is. She's worse than you think. I've seen things, Mr. Harrison. Things I can't prove. But I'm done being scared of her. We hung up. I sat in my car in the driveway, unable to go inside. Unable to face Sarah. Unable to process what my life had become. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Is this Marcus Harrison? Yes. This is Detective Jennifer Ruiz with the county police. I need you to come to the station to answer questions regarding a case involving Madison Brennan. We've received evidence suggesting that false accusations were made 3 years ago against your son, Tyler Harrison. I'll be right there. The police station was fluorescent lights and stale coffee and Detective Ruiz's sharp eyes studying me across a metal table. Walk me through exactly what happened 3 years ago, she said. I told her everything. The principal's office. The evidence. Tyler's denials. The military school. Every excruciating detail. Detective Ruiz took notes, her expression hardening. And you never questioned the evidence? The timing? The witnesses all being kids with grudges against your son? I questioned it. I didn't want to believe my stepdaughter was capable of something like that. I didn't want my marriage to fail. I didn't want to be the father who couldn't control his own son. Shame burned through me. I took the coward's way out. A young man's life was destroyed. That's more than cowardice, Mr. Harrison. Her voice was cold. But you're also a victim here. Fraud, conspiracy, filing false reports. Madison Brennan committed multiple crimes. So did the witnesses who lied, if we can prove they knew they were lying. Chloe Reeves's testimony helps, but we'll need more. What happens now? We investigate. We interview Madison, the witnesses, school staff. We review the original evidence with new eyes. If we can build a case, Madison will be charged. She's 17, so she'd be tried as a minor, but given the premeditation and the severity of the impact, the prosecutor might push for adult charges. And Tyler? His record gets cleared. We'll issue a formal statement exonerating him. But Mr. Harrison, you need to understand, we can't give him back the 3 years he lost. We can't undo the psychological damage. The best we can do is justice and a cleared name. It's not enough. It never is. I left the station just as Sarah called, hysterical. The police are here. They want to talk to Madison. They have a warrant for her phone and computer. Marcus, what's happening? Madison's getting arrested. Probably. Let them do their job. How can you be so calm? This is my daughter. Your daughter destroyed our son. The words came out flat. Final. I'm done protecting her. I'm done choosing her over Tyler. 3 years too late, but I'm done. Sarah hung up on me. I drove to a coffee shop and sat there for hours, watching traffic pass, thinking about nothing and everything. My phone buzzed constantly, Sarah calling, texting, begging me to come home and help defend Madison. I turned it off. At 6 p.m., Detective Ruiz called my work phone. Marcus, Madison Brennan just lawyered up and refused to answer questions. But we got her phone before she could wipe it. The evidence is extensive. She's been planning another frame-up, like Chloe said. Detailed notes. Doctored screenshots. Texts to potential witnesses offering money for their statements. She was going to do it again. Without hesitation. This girl is a predator, Marcus. Cold, calculating, no empathy. We're charging her with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, filing false reports, and witness tampering. The DA's pushing for adult charges given the pattern of behavior and future planning. She could face serious prison time. Good. There's something else. We interviewed the original witnesses. 2 of them, Aiden Porter and Marcus Chen, broke down and confessed that Madison had blackmailed them into lying. She had compromising photos from a party, threatened to post them online if they didn't cooperate. They've been living with the guilt for 3 years. More victims. More lives Madison had twisted to serve her purposes. What about Tyler? I asked. What does this mean for him? We're issuing a formal exoneration today. Ridgemont's been notified. The school board is reviewing the original case and will issue their own statement clearing him. But Marcus. Tyler's lawyer called me. Your son's filing a civil suit against the school district and against you and your wife for the damage caused by the false accusations and your actions based on them. My stomach dropped. He's suing me? Emotional distress, loss of normal childhood, educational disruption. The lawyer says Tyler's been in therapy at Ridgemont dealing with trust issues, depression, and PTSD from the betrayal. They have documentation of everything. I deserve it. Yeah, Detective Ruiz said quietly. You probably do. The news broke 2 days later. Local media picked up the story. Teenage girl frames stepbrother for bullying, ruins his life, plans to do it again to rival student. Madison's photo was all over the internet, speculation running wild. Theories about sociopathy, commentary on female manipulation, think pieces about believing accusers versus due process. Our lives became a circus. Sarah moved into the guest room. We spoke only when necessary, and even then in clipped, bitter sentences. She blamed me for turning Madison in. I blamed her for raising a monster. Both of us were right. Both of us were broken. Madison got released on bail. She came home silent and cold, refused to acknowledge me, spent all her time in her room with her lawyer. Sarah orbited around her like a morning satellite, making excuses, insisting there had to be an explanation. She's your daughter, I said one night. You raised her alone for 12 years before I came along. What did I miss? What created this? Sarah's face crumpled. I don't know. I taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to not let anyone push her around. But this? This isn't strength. This is cruelty. And I don't know where I went wrong. Maybe she'd always been this way. Maybe some people are just born without the wiring for empathy. Or maybe Sarah had inadvertently taught Madison that the world was a competition where you eliminate threats by any means necessary. Either way, the result was the same. Tyler still wouldn't return my calls. His lawyer sent me the lawsuit papers. Reading them was like swallowing glass, every documented instance of emotional harm, every therapy session note, every moment of suffering laid out in clinical legal language. I called the lawyer. Tell Tyler I'll settle for whatever he wants. Money, a public apology, whatever he needs. I won't fight this. Mr. Harrison, with respect, your son doesn't want your money. He wants acknowledgement. He wants you to face consequences the way he had to face consequences for something he didn't do. Then I'll face them. Tell him that. Please. I'll pass along the message. But Tyler never called. Never wrote. Existed in my life only as a lawsuit and a hole in my heart. Madison's trial was set for 6 months out. The DA was pushing hard, charging her as an adult, asking for prison time, making an example of what happens when someone weaponizes accusations for personal gain. Madison's lawyer argued diminished capacity, teenage brain development, influence from peer pressure. The media ate it all up. I watched my stepdaughter in the courtroom during preliminary hearings and saw a stranger. No remorse. No shame. Just cold calculation, figuring out what performance would play best to the judge. Sarah sat beside her every day, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. I sat in the back, alone, wondering how I'd gotten here. The turning point came during a hearing on admissibility of evidence. The prosecutor played Chloe's video in open court. Watching Madison's voice fill that courtroom, casual, cruel, admitting to everything with bored amusement, something shifted in Sarah's face. After the hearing, she cornered Madison in a private room. I wasn't there, but Sarah told me later what happened. Is it true? All of it? You really did frame Tyler on purpose? Madison looked at her mother and shrugged. He was in the way. You were spending too much time worrying about him and Marcus's relationship. I needed you focused on me. So you destroyed a boy's life? Sent him away from his father? Caused him years of pain? It worked, didn't it? You had more time for me. We were happy. Madison, that's not happiness. That's sociopathy. That's evil. Don't be dramatic, Mom. People manipulate each other all the time. I'm just better at it than most people. Sarah slapped her. First time she'd ever hit her daughter. Madison's head snapped to the side, then slowly turned back, and she smiled. There it is. The real you. Took you long enough. Sarah came home that night and packed Madison's things. She's staying with my sister until the trial, she said, voice hollow. I can't look at her anymore. I don't know who she is. Sarah, don't. Just don't. She sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I defended her. I chose her over Tyler. Over your son, who was innocent. I'm as guilty as you are. What do we do now? We live with it. We carry this weight forever. And we pray Tyler finds a way to forgive us, even though we don't deserve it. The trial happened in April. 3 years and 6 months after Tyler was sent to military school. Madison was convicted on all counts: conspiracy, filing false reports, witness tampering, fraud. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in juvenile detention followed by probation, mandatory therapy, and community service. This was a calculated, cruel campaign to destroy an innocent person's reputation and life, the judge said. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no understanding of the harm you caused. You need serious intervention before you're released back into society. Madison showed no reaction. Just stood there, calm and cold, as they led her away. I felt nothing watching her go. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just exhaustion. Tyler's exoneration was official. The school board issued a formal apology. Ridgemont issued a statement clearing his record and commending him for his resilience. Local media ran stories about the innocent boy who'd been wronged and how he'd thrived despite it all. Tyler still wouldn't talk to me. His lawsuit proceeded. My lawyer advised fighting it, claiming I'd acted on good faith belief in the evidence. I fired that lawyer and hired one who would just negotiate a fair settlement. We ended up in mediation 6 months after Madison's conviction. Tyler sat across the table from me for the first time in nearly 4 years. He looked like a stranger. Military bearing, cold eyes, jaw set like granite. Nothing left of the boy who'd once asked me to teach him guitar. Tyler, I started, but he held up a hand. My lawyer will handle this. I'm only here because the mediator required it. The settlement was painful: a formal public apology, payment for all therapy costs past and future, compensation for the emotional distress, money set aside in a trust for any needs he had transitioning out of military service. I agreed to everything without negotiation. At the end, the mediator asked if we wanted time to speak privately. Tyler stood immediately. No. We're done here. Tyler, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. He looked at his lawyer, who nodded. 5 minutes. Everyone else left. Tyler and I sat across the table in excruciating silence. I failed you, I said finally. There's no excuse. No justification. I chose wrong. I believed the wrong person. I sent you away when you needed me most. I destroyed our relationship because I was weak and scared and stupid. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Dad? That I forgive you? That we can go back to the way things were? He shook his head. That's not happening. You proved to me that your love is conditional. That evidence from strangers means more than your own son's word. I can't unlearn that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But Tyler, you're graduating from Ridgemont next month. Then West Point. The army. What if something happens to you and we never reconcile? What if you deploy somewhere and then you'll live with the regret? Like I've lived with the betrayal. His voice stayed level. Emotionless. I'm not doing this for you. This settlement, the mediation, all of it, I'm doing it so I can close this chapter and move on. You're part of the past I'm leaving behind. Each word was a nail in a coffin. Can I at least come to your graduation? No. Tyler, no. You lost that right when you sent me away. He stood. We're done. Don't call me. Don't write. Don't show up at West Point. I have a new life now, and you're not in it. He walked out. I sat in that mediation room for 20 minutes after, staring at the wall, feeling completely hollow. 3 months later, I stood outside Ridgemont's graduation ceremony. Tyler had been clear, I wasn't welcome. But I'd driven the 2 hours anyway, unable to stay away, knowing I'd just watch from a distance. The graduates filed out in their dress uniforms. I spotted Tyler easily, taller than most, walking with absolute confidence, honor cords on his shoulders marking him as top of his class. The family section erupted in applause. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, behind a tree, watching through binoculars like a stalker. He smiled at something another graduate said. Real smile, genuine, the kind I hadn't seen from him in 4 years. He had friends. People who made him happy. A life that didn't include me. Good. He deserved that. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. Detective Ruiz stood there, out of uniform, gentle expression on her face. Figured you'd be here, she said. For what it's worth, Tyler's doing well. I've kept in touch with his counselor. He's healing. Slowly. The therapy's helping. Did he send you to tell me to leave? No. He doesn't know I'm here. I worked a lot of cases in my career, Marcus. Bad ones. But something about this one stuck with me. A good kid gets betrayed by the people who should protect him most. And I wanted you to know that despite everything, he's going to be okay. But I won't be. No. Probably not. That's the price you pay. She squeezed my shoulder. Make it mean something. Help other parents recognize manipulation. Speak up about the importance of believing your kids. Turn your failure into something that helps someone else. She walked away. I watched Tyler for 10 more minutes as he took photos with friends, laughed at jokes, looked toward the future with clear eyes. Then I got in my car and drove home. Sarah and I divorced quietly 6 months later. No drama, no fighting. Just two broken people who couldn't look at each other without seeing their shared failure. She moved to her sister's place across the state. I stayed in the house, surrounded by ghosts. Madison got out of juvenile detention after serving her full 3 years. I heard through Sarah that she'd shown model behavior inside but still exhibited no real remorse. She was living in a halfway house, working retail, seeing a court-mandated therapist. Sarah visited her once a month. I never asked about it. Tyler graduated from West Point with honors. I found out from a news article about outstanding cadets. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant, assigned to an engineering battalion. The photo showed him in his dress uniform, serious and proud. I framed it. Hung it in the hallway next to his childhood photos. A shrine to a relationship that no longer existed. Every year on his birthday, I wrote him a letter. Never sent them, he'd been clear about boundaries, but I wrote them anyway. Apologies, updates on my life, expressions of pride in his accomplishments that I learned about third hand. Hundreds of pages of things I'd never get to say to his face. 5 years after the trial, I got an email. Subject line, from Tyler. My hands shook opening it. I read it 50 times. Cried like I hadn't cried since that day in the parking lot. Tyler was happy. Tyler was moving on. Tyler was okay. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement. A door opened just a crack, letting in the smallest sliver of light. I wrote back. He didn't respond. But that was okay. It was more than I deserved. 7 years after Madison's trial, I started speaking at schools about parental responsibility and recognizing manipulation. Turned my failure into a lesson for others. I chose wrong, I'd tell auditoriums full of parents. I believed evidence over instinct. I trusted the wrong person. Don't make my mistakes. Know your children. Really know them. And when they come to you desperate and scared, swearing they're innocent, pause. Really pause before you decide they're lying. Some parents thanked me. Others looked at me with disgust. All of them made sure to hug their kids tighter that night. That was enough. 10 years after sending Tyler to military school, I was at a coffee shop when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. Tyler stood there, older, lines around his eyes, wedding ring on his finger. Beside him, a pretty woman with kind eyes, Rachel, I assumed. And in her arms, a baby girl. Tyler. I stood so fast I knocked my chair over. We were in town visiting Rachel's parents. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Saw you through the window. Rachel said I'd regret it if I didn't at least say hello. Hello. The word came out strangled. We stood in awkward silence. Then Tyler gestured to the baby. This is Emma. She's 6 months old. I looked at my granddaughter, chubby cheeks, bright eyes, one tiny hand gripping Rachel's shirt. Something in my chest cracked open. She's beautiful. Yeah. Tyler's voice softened. She is. More silence. Then Tyler took a breath. Look, Dad. I'm not here to say everything's fine. It's not. There's still hurt. Still trust issues I'm working through. But Rachel's been pushing me to at least try. And becoming a father myself. It made me think about things differently. I don't expect anything, I said quickly. You don't owe me. I know I don't owe you anything. But maybe we could have coffee. Talk. See if there's anything left to build on. He looked uncertain. Vulnerable. I'm not promising anything. But we could try. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We sat down. Talked for an hour. Awkward, painful, honest conversation about the past decade. Tyler told me about West Point, about meeting Rachel, about the therapy that helped him process the betrayal. I told him about the divorce, about the speaking engagements, about the letters I wrote but never sent. I kept them all, I admitted. Every birthday letter. Every Christmas letter. Everything I wanted to say but couldn't. I want to read them. Someday. Not yet. But someday. We didn't fix everything that day. Didn't even fix most things. But we started. One difficult conversation at a time. One careful step towards something that might eventually look like reconciliation. Tyler didn't call me Dad again that day. Didn't hug me when they left. But he asked for my phone number. Said he'd text when they got back home. Said maybe Emma could meet her grandfather properly when she was older and I'd earn that privilege. It was more than I deserved. More than I dared hope for. And it was enough. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make when everything in you screams to doubt. Trust isn't built in moments of ease but in the crucible of crisis, when believing costs you something. Every child needs to know that no matter what evidence piles up against them, no matter how convincing the lies become, there's one person who will always give them the benefit of the doubt. One person who knows their heart well enough to see through deception. I learned this lesson too late, paid for it with years of regret, and nearly lost my son forever. But Tyler's tentative reach across the chasm of our broken relationship taught me something I'm still learning. Redemption isn't about erasing mistakes. It's about carrying their weight honestly, changing because of them, and hoping that someday, the people you've hurt might let you try again. Not because you deserve it, but because healing, real healing, sometimes requires both the wounded and the wounder to choose mercy over justice, connection over punishment, and the terrifying vulnerability of hope over the safety of permanent separation. If you're a parent, know your child's heart like you know your own name. And when they need you to believe in them, do it fiercely, even when the world says you're wrong. That faith might be the only thing standing between them and a lifetime of betrayal wounds that never quite heal. Story 3. My wife served me divorce papers at my company's annual dinner in front of 200 colleagues and said, I can't be married to a failure anymore. My boss awkwardly patted my shoulder. Maybe take some time off, buddy. She moved in with my business partner the next day. He'd given her my promotion. I signed the papers without a lawyer and disappeared from social media. That was 11 months ago. This morning, they both woke up to FBI agents at their door, and my former boss just realized every patent in the company has my name on it. You're embarrassing yourself, Marcus. Just sign them. Jennifer's voice cut through the polite applause for the quarterly earnings report. 200 heads turned toward our table near the podium. The white envelope landed face up between my untouched salmon and her empty wine glass. Through the translucent paper, I could see the bold letters, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. My business partner, Derek Chen, sat 3 seats down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My boss, Paul Hendricks, froze mid-bite, fork suspended in the air like a conductor's baton. Jen, this isn't 11 years, Marcus. 11 years I've watched you stay small. Play it safe. While everyone else climbs, you just exist. She stood, smoothing her red dress. Derek understands ambition. He's going places. You've been stuck in the same position for 4 years. The CFO's wife gasped. Someone's water glass tipped over. Derek finally looked up, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. Not surprise. Not discomfort. Relief. I'll get the check, Paul muttered, already rising. His hand landed on my shoulder with the weight of pity. Marcus, buddy, maybe take some time off. Personal leave. We'll sort out your projects. That's how I learned I was being demoted. At a banquet. In front of the entire company. While my wife handed me divorce papers. I didn't make a scene. Didn't argue. I folded the envelope, placed it in my jacket pocket, and walked out of the Waterford Hotel ballroom with my head high. My hands started shaking in the parking garage. By the time I reached my car, I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The next morning, Jennifer's closet was empty. The photo from our honeymoon in Santorini, gone from the mantel. Her coffee mug with the chipped handle that she refused to throw away, vanished. She'd been planning this. Packing in secret while he worked late on the Anderson project. The project Derek would now oversee. The project that would have been my ticket to senior engineer. I called her. Voicemail. Sent a text asking if we could talk. Read receipt, no response. Then Derek posted on Instagram, a champagne toast, Jennifer's face pressed against his shoulder, her left hand conspicuously bare. The caption read, New Beginnings. 43 people liked it in the first hour. The office was worse. People stopped talking when I entered rooms. Derek's promotion to Senior VP of Engineering was announced via company-wide email that Tuesday. His new office was 3 doors down from Paul's. My office, the one I'd occupied for 6 years, was reassigned to a new hire fresh out of MIT. It's just a reshuffle, Paul explained, not meeting my eyes. You'll be working on maintenance protocols. Same pay grade, technically. Technically. The word hung between us like smoke. I signed the divorce papers on a Wednesday afternoon in a Starbucks 2 miles from my new apartment. No lawyer. No negotiation. Jennifer got the house, the better car, half my 401k. She'd already moved into Derek's place in Harbor View, the waterfront development I'd dreamed about living in since we first visited 5 years ago. You're making this easy, the notary said, watching me initial each page without reading them. Yeah, I replied. I'm good at making things easy. That weekend, I deleted Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Every digital footprint I'd carefully cultivated over a decade. My last post was a photo from 2 years ago, Jennifer and me at Derek's wedding, all of us smiling, believing we were friends. I stopped showing up to the office. Used my accumulated sick leave, then vacation days, then unpaid time off. Paul sent increasingly concerned emails. HR called twice. I let everything go to voicemail. The only thing I kept doing was checking my bank account. Watching the automatic deposits appear every 2 weeks. Smaller now, after Jennifer's court-mandated share, but still coming. The money felt like an insult. Like they were paying me to disappear. So I disappeared. For 11 months, I lived like a ghost. Grew a beard. Lost 20 pounds. Spent my days in a tiny apartment in Riverside, a neighborhood where nobody from my old life would ever visit. I stopped eating at restaurants we'd frequented. Avoided the grocery store where Jennifer liked to shop. Cut my hair at a barber college instead of the salon where Derek's wife, ex-wife, worked. I did 3 things during those 11 months. First, I read. Everything. Corporate law. Intellectual property rights. Patent regulations. Securities fraud. Wire fraud. Tax codes. I ordered textbooks used by law students. Subscribed to legal journals. Watched recorded lectures from Columbia and Yale. My apartment filled with highlighted pages and sticky notes. Second, I retrieved something from my safe deposit box. Something I'd placed there 7 years ago after a late-night conversation with Jennifer about worst-case scenarios and emergency plans. A conversation she'd forgotten about after 3 glasses of wine. I hadn't. Third, I made phone calls. Dozens of them. To people who understood what I'd built. What I'd created. What had my name on it in permanent ink. The patents. All 73 of them. When TechFlow Solutions was just Derek's garage startup 13 years ago, I was the one who made it work. His ideas were brilliant but impractical. I refined them. Debugged them. Turned concepts into products that could be manufactured, marketed, sold. Every breakthrough the company claimed, the neural processor architecture, the distributed ledger protocol, the quantum-resistant encryption algorithm, came from my late nights, my burned dinners, my neglected marriage. And I'd made one decision that seemed paranoid at the time. I filed the patents in my name. Derek had laughed about it. Legal protection, right? If the company goes under, we own the tech. Paul had signed off on it without reading the fine print. Standard practice for small startups, the lawyer had assured us. Founders often held patents individually before transferring them post-IPO. Except we never had an IPO. The company exploded in value, $900 million at last valuation, but remained privately held. Derek and Paul own the company. I own the technology. They'd forgotten. Or assumed the paperwork had been updated. Or never bothered to check. I knew because I'd checked. 3 times. Once before Jennifer left. Once the week after. And once more before I made the calls. In month 6 of my disappearance, I contacted TechFlow's biggest competitor. Quantum Dynamics. Their CEO, Patricia Chen, no relation to Derek, took my meeting in a neutral hotel lobby in Sacramento. I brought documentation. Patent certificates. Technical specifications. Proof of ownership. You're telling me, Patricia said slowly, reviewing the papers through reading glasses, that TechFlow's entire product line is built on patents you hold individually? Not entirely. Maybe 70%. The critical parts. The pieces that make everything else work. And you want to license these patents to us? I want to sell them. Exclusively. With one condition. She looked up. Name it. The sale goes through 11 months from now. Not a day earlier. And when it does, you enforce your ownership immediately. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You're destroying them. I'm exercising my legal rights. Same thing. She extended her hand. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. But Marcus? If this is some kind of elaborate fraud, if you don't actually own what you claim, I do. And I have copies of everything. Stored in 6 different locations. Digital and physical. Why wait 11 months? I thought about Jennifer's face in the ballroom. Derek's Instagram post. Paul's pitying shoulder pat. Because I want them comfortable. Successful. Secure. Understanding flickered in her eyes. You want them to forget you exist. Exactly. The next 5 months were careful. Deliberate. I lived on rice and beans, saving every penny. Worked part-time at a hardware store under a nickname, Mark instead of Marcus. Nobody asked questions. The manager, a retired veteran named Bobby, just appreciated that I showed up on time and knew which end of a hammer to hold. You're overqualified for this, Bobby said once, watching me explain voltage requirements to a confused customer. Sometimes being overqualified is exactly right, I replied. I monitored TechFlow from a distance. They landed a massive contract with the Department of Defense. $200 million over 5 years. Derek's face was on the cover of Tech Week magazine under the headline, "The Quiet Genius Revolutionizing Cybersecurity." Jennifer appeared in 3 of the article's photos, described as his partner in work and life. All announced record bonuses. Expanded to offices in Seattle and Austin. Hired 100 new engineers. Everything they built on my patents. My technology. My work. In month 9, I hired a lawyer. Not a local attorney. Not someone from California. I found a specialist in intellectual property litigation from Chicago named Rachel Morse who'd successfully sued 3 Fortune 500 companies. Her fee was astronomical. I paid it with money I'd been saving since my 20s, funds Jennifer didn't know about from a brief freelance career before we married. This is airtight, Rachel said after reviewing my documentation. I've never seen ownership this clear-cut. Usually there's some ambiguity, some shared credit. But this? Every patent application, every filing, every piece of correspondence lists you as sole inventor. The company is listed as a signee on exactly 0 of these documents. Can they argue I developed them as an employee? Work for hire? They can try. They'll lose. Your employment contract, she waved the ancient document I'd retrieved from storage, has no intellectual property clause. Nothing about assignment of inventions. It's almost negligent how poorly written this is. Derek's cousin drafted it. He was a real estate lawyer. Rachel laughed. That explains everything. In month 10, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "I know what you're doing." My finger hovered over the delete button. Then I opened it. I downloaded the files onto an encrypted drive. Then read through them. Once. Twice. 3 times. Derek to Paul, 4 months before the banquet, Marcus is a liability. Too rigid. The DoD contract requires flexibility he won't provide. We need him out of the decision-making process. All to Derek, can't fire him without cause. His performance reviews are spotless. Options? Derek to Paul, his wife is unhappy. I've talked to her at a few events. She feels neglected. What if we offer her something? A position in the company, maybe? Give her a reason to see him as the obstacle? They'd weaponized my marriage. Used Jennifer's frustrations, legitimate frustrations I'd been too blind to address, to orchestrate my removal. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was an email from Derek to a contact at a Chinese tech conglomerate. Dated 6 weeks after I left. We're ready to move forward with the licensing agreement for the neural processor specs. Marcus Wells is no longer with the company and can't block the deal. Transfer will occur in installments to avoid SEC scrutiny. They were selling my technology to a foreign entity. Not just selling, illegally transferring proprietary encryption protocols developed with federal grant money. The kind of deal that violated the international traffic in arms regulations. The kind of deal that attracted FBI attention. I forwarded everything to Rachel. Then made a call to a number I'd found during my months of legal research. A tip line. The FBI's Economic Espionage Division. I have evidence of illegal technology transfer, I told the agent who answered. Corporate theft and potential violations of ETAR. Can you be more specific? I can be extremely specific. How soon can we meet? Month 11 arrived like a ticking clock. Patricia Chen's lawyers finalized the purchase agreement. $300 million for exclusive ownership of 73 patents. Payable upon signing. Enforcement to begin immediately. The FBI opened an investigation into TechFlow. Agent Michael Torres became my primary contact. He was younger than expected, maybe 35, with the careful demeanor of someone who'd learned not to promise outcomes. The evidence from Sarah Kim is substantial, he said during our fourth meeting. Combined with financial records we've subpoenaed, we're building a strong case. But these things take time. I have time, I said. They don't. What do you mean? In 2 days, their entire business becomes illegal. They'll be using technology they don't own without license. Every product they sell becomes an infringement. Every contract becomes invalid. Torres leaned back in his chair. You've been planning this for a while. 11 months. Why wait? You could have filed suit immediately. Because I wanted them to build something worth destroying. I wanted them invested. Committed. I wanted them to believe they'd won. On day 1 of month 12, Patricia's lawyers sent the formal transfer notice to TechFlow. By 9 a.m. Pacific Time, Derek, Paul, and the company's general counsel received certified letters informing them that Marcus Wells had sold all patents underlying their technology to Quantum Dynamics. Effective immediately. All usage without license constituted infringement. By 10 a.m., TechFlow's lawyers were on the phone with Rachel. By 11 a.m., they realized the depth of their problem. By noon, trading in TechFlow's private shares was halted pending clarification of asset ownership. I watched it unfold from Bobby's hardware store. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Industry blogs picked up the story within hours. TechFlow faces existential patent crisis. Founder's exit creates legal nightmare. How did TechFlow miss this? Derek called. 23 times. Left voicemails that devolved from professional to desperate to angry. Jennifer called. Twice. No voicemails. Paul sent an email with the subject line, "We need to talk. Please." I responded to none of them. Day 2, the FBI executed search warrants. 6 agents arrived at TechFlow's headquarters at 6 a.m. Another team went to Derek's home. A third to Paul's residence in Belmont Heights. Sarah's evidence had been enough. The illegal licensing deal with the Chinese conglomerate left digital fingerprints everywhere. Financial transfers that should have been reported weren't. Technology exports that required government approval had been shipped without oversight. Derek and Paul had been sloppy, arrogant, certain they were untouchable. Agent Torres called that afternoon. Arrests will be made within 48 hours. Probably both of them, plus the CFO. Charges include wire fraud, export violations, and conspiracy to commit economic espionage. And Jennifer? She's not implicated in the criminal activity. But her employment records show she was hired under suspicious circumstances. Given a senior position she wasn't qualified for. That'll come up in civil proceedings. Civil proceedings. The lawsuits were already starting. Quantum Dynamics filed first, seeking immediate injunction against TechFlow's operations. Shareholders filed next, 2 class action suits alleging fraud and mismanagement. Employees filed third, claiming their stock options were now worthless due to leadership negligence. TechFlow's valuation dropped from $900 million to $50 million in 3 days. By week's end, they'd laid off 60% of staff. The DoD contract was suspended pending investigation. I went back to work at the hardware store. Bobby raised my wage by $2 an hour without being asked. "You're on the news," he said, nodding toward the small TV behind the register. A legal analyst was explaining intellectual property law using TechFlow as a case study. "Yeah. You the guy who owned all those patents?" "Yeah." Bobby nodded slowly, measuring his words. "They deserved it?" I thought about Jennifer's face in the ballroom. Derek's Instagram post. Paul's pitying shoulder pat. The emails where they'd plotted my removal like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person who'd built everything they claimed as theirs. "Yeah," I said. "They did." "Good." He handed me a box cutter. "Shipment's here. Need those price tags updated by closing." The mundane request grounded me. For 11 months I'd lived for this moment. Planned it. Executed it with precision. And now that it had arrived, I felt strangely hollow. On day 8, Derek and Paul were arrested. Perp walks and everything. The news footage showed them in handcuffs, federal agents on either side, cameras flashing. Derek looked smaller somehow. Paul looked old. Jennifer appeared in some of the footage. Standing in the background of Derek's house as agents carried out boxes of documents. Her face was blurred but I recognized her posture. The way she crossed her arms when she felt defensive. I watched it once. Then turned off my phone. Rachel called that evening. "Quantum Dynamics wants to meet. They're offering you a position. Chief Innovation Officer. 7-figure salary. Your own team. Essentially, They want you to continue developing the technology you created. What did you tell them? That I'd relay the message. Marcus, this is a phenomenal opportunity. You'd be set for life. I'll think about it. There's also interest from 3 venture capital firms about backing your own startup. And PBS wants to interview you for a segment on corporate ethics. No interviews. Okay. But Marcus? You need to decide what comes next. You can't work at a hardware store forever. Why not? Silence on the line. Then, carefully, because you're worth more than that. I'm worth exactly what I'm worth. The patents didn't make me valuable. They were just proof of work I'd already done. That's very zen. It's very tired, Rachel. I'll call you tomorrow. Week 3 brought the preliminary hearings. Derek pleaded not guilty. All pleaded not guilty. Their lawyers argued entrapment, misunderstanding, lack of criminal intent. The judge wasn't impressed. Bail was set at $2 million each. Jennifer filed for an emergency hearing to challenge the divorce settlement. Her lawyer argued she'd signed under false pretenses, not knowing the full extent of my assets. Rachel crushed the motion in 40 minutes. The settlement stood. TechFlow declared bankruptcy in week 4. Assets were liquidated to pay creditors. The building was sold. Equipment auctioned. 200 employees lost their jobs. Some of them reached out to me. Angry emails. Accusations that I'd destroyed innocent lives to get revenge on 2 people. They weren't entirely wrong. I responded to one email. Just one. A junior engineer named Kevin who'd started the same week I was demoted. He didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. Month 2, Derek's trial date was set. 6 months away. Paul's trial was combined with his. The prosecutor told Rachel they had enough evidence to pursue 30-year sentences. Jennifer moved out of Derek's place and back to Ohio, where her parents lived. She sent me a letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. I read it once. Then burned it in the kitchen sink. The content doesn't matter. Apologies and explanations never undo the damage. They just make the person saying them feel better. Patricia Chen called with a revised offer. We've finished analyzing the patents. Our engineers say you were a decade ahead of the industry. Marcus, you could have started your own company. Raised funding. Built an empire. Why didn't you? Because I liked being an engineer. I liked solving problems. I didn't want to manage people or court investors or play politics. And now? Now I know that not playing politics doesn't mean politics won't be played on you. So what's your answer? CIO position? Your own lab? Name your terms. I looked around my tiny apartment. At the stack of library books on corporate law. At the single photo I'd kept from my old life, me at my college graduation, diploma in hand, believing the future was built on merit and hard work. I'll take the position, I said. But I want something else too. Name it. A fellowship program. Full scholarships for engineers from non-traditional backgrounds. People who have the talent but not the pedigree. I want to fund 10 students per year. Full ride. No strings attached except they work on meaningful problems. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's going to cost millions. I just sold you patents worth $300 million. I can afford it. All right. Done. When can you start? After the trial. I want to see it through. Derek and Paul's trial became national news. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Sarah's emails. Financial records showing the illegal Chinese deal. Expert testimony about the significance of the stolen technology. My own testimony, delivered over 3 days, methodically explaining every patent, every innovation, every instance where Derek and Paul had claimed credit for my work. Derek's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive. A disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge after a failed marriage. Isn't it true, the lawyer asked, that you were upset your wife left you for Mr. Chen? Yes. And isn't it true you blamed him for the dissolution of your marriage? Initially, yes. So this entire situation, the patent sale, the criminal investigation, stems from a personal grudge? Rachel objected. The judge sustained it. But I asked to answer anyway. My wife made her own choices, I said. Derek made his. Paul made his. What I did with my patents, technology I created, that I legally owned, had nothing to do with revenge. It had to do with ownership. They took credit for my work. They built a company worth $900 million on my inventions. They never paid me for it. Never licensed it. Just assumed it belonged to them because I'd been too passive to claim it. So you destroyed a company, cost 200 people their jobs, just to prove a point about ownership? No. I enforced my legal rights. The fact that their entire business model was built on stolen intellectual property isn't my fault. It's theirs. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Found Derek guilty on 17 counts. Paul guilty on 14. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 months later. Jennifer attended every day of the trial. Sat in the back row, never making eye contact. On the final day, after the verdict was read, she waited in the courthouse lobby. Marcus. I stopped. Turned. I'm sorry, she said. For all of it. For believing Derek. For not seeing what they were doing. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Jennifer, you made a choice based on what you thought was best for your life. That's your right. What Derek and Paul did, that was criminal. What you did was just human. Do you hate me? I thought about that. Really thought. No. I don't. I'm just done. She nodded. Tears on her face. You were always too kind. I wasn't kind. I was asleep. There's a difference. I walked away. Didn't look back. Derek and Paul were sentenced to 22 and 18 years respectively. With good behavior, they'd serve maybe 12 to 14. Jennifer divorced Derek while he was in county jail awaiting sentencing. The proceedings took 45 minutes. I started at Quantum Dynamics 3 weeks after the sentencing. My office overlooked the bay. I had a team of 12 engineers, all brilliant, all hungry to build something meaningful. The fellowship program launched in the spring. We received 2,000 applications for 10 spots. One of the fellows was a single mother from Detroit who'd taught herself coding while working 3 jobs. Another was a refugee from Syria who'd learned engineering from YouTube videos. Every one of them had the talent. None of them had the opportunities I'd taken for granted. You're doing good work here, Patricia said during a quarterly review. The new processor architecture is revolutionary. And the fellowship? Marcus, you're changing lives. Just trying to build something that can't be stolen. She smiled. You know what the difference is between you and Derek? He wanted credit. You want the work to matter. Maybe. No, maybe. It's why you're here and he's in federal prison. I thought about that conversation on my drive home. About the difference between wanting recognition and wanting impact. Derek had chased the former his entire life. I defaulted into the latter without realizing it. My apartment was bigger now. Still modest, but comfortable. I'd bought a few things. A decent coffee maker. Some actual furniture. A painting from a local artist that reminded me of Santorini. The photo from my college graduation sat on the bookshelf. Next to it, a new photo, me with the 10 fellowship recipients, all of us grinning like we'd won something. Maybe we had. Some nights, I wondered what I'd lost. The simplicity of my old life. The belief that good work would be recognized. The marriage I'd thought was solid. The friendships I'd assumed were real. But mostly, I thought about what I'd learned. That silence can be a strategy. That patience can be power. That owning your work, truly owning it, means controlling your destiny. Derek and Paul taught me that the game was never fair. Jennifer taught me that love requires attention, not just presence. Rachel taught me that legal systems work if you understand them. Patricia taught me that second chances come to people who've earned them through what they've built, not what they've said. Bobby from the hardware store taught me that dignity isn't about your job title. It's about showing up. Doing the work. Being present even when nobody's watching. I still visit him sometimes. Bring coffee. Help with inventory. He never asks about my new life. Just appreciates that I remember where I came from. You turned out okay, he said once, unprompted. I'm trying to. That's all any of us can do, Mark. He still calls me Mark. I let him. It reminds me that names are just labels. What matters is the work underneath. 6 months into my tenure at Quantum Dynamics, something unexpected happened. Sarah Kim called. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before the trial. We met at a coffee shop in Berkeley, neutral territory. She looked different, confident, centered. She'd started her own consulting firm helping tech companies audit their HR practices. What is it? She pulled out her laptop and opened a folder. When I gave you those files about Derek and Paul, I didn't give you everything. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? There were other emails. Between Derek and someone at the SEC. He was preparing to take TechFlow public. The IPO was scheduled for 2 months after the trial would have ended. If you'd waited just a few more weeks to sell the patents, the company would have been worth over $2 billion. Your patents would have been worth more than I sold them for. Significantly more. Marcus, I kept that information back because I thought you deserved to know Derek's full plan. But I also thought if I told you, you might wait. And if you waited, you might lose your window. I leaned back, processing this. So you made a choice for me. I made a choice to protect your timeline. Derek was already in talks with investigators about the Chinese deal. If the FBI had moved faster, if he'd been arrested before you could sell the patents, Quantum Dynamics might have backed out. The whole thing could have collapsed. You manipulated me. I gave you the best chance of success. She closed the laptop. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know what you left on the table. 2 billion becomes 300 million. That's a significant difference. Why tell me it all? Because I've been carrying it around for 6 months and it's been eating me alive. Because you trusted me and I didn't give you complete information. Because, she paused, because we both know what it's like when people make decisions for you instead of with you. I thought about Jennifer. About Derek and Paul. About every person who'd decided what was best for me without asking. You're right, I said finally. You should have told me. I know. But you were also right that I might have waited. Gotten greedy. Tried to maximize the payout. And in that waiting, I might have lost everything. Sarah met my eyes. So you're not angry? I'm not angry. I'm just aware now that even the people trying to help me have their own agendas. That's a depressing worldview. It's a realistic one. We finished our coffee in silence. As we stood to leave, Sarah said, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. The money isn't what mattered. It was about proving the work was yours. Maybe, no maybe. I've worked with a lot of people in tech. Most of them would have taken the $2 billion and never looked back. You took $300 million and built something that matters. That's rare. After she left, I sat in my car for 20 minutes. Thinking about roads not taken. About the phantom $1.5 billion I'd never have. About whether I'd make the same choice again, knowing what I knew now. The answer, I realized, was yes. Because the money was never the point. The point was reclaiming what was mine. And that had no price tag. That night, I received an email from an unexpected source. Paul Hendricks. Writing from federal prison. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop without responding. Some apologies don't deserve acknowledgement. Not because they're insincere, but because accepting them implies a relationship that no longer exists. Paul and I weren't colleagues anymore. Weren't friends. We were just 2 people whose paths had intersected and diverged, leaving wreckage in the space between. His guilt wasn't my responsibility to absolve. The fellowship program's first cohort graduated that spring. All 10 students received job offers. 8 accepted positions at major tech companies. 2 started their own ventures. The single mother from Detroit developed an algorithm for optimizing public transit in underserved communities. The Syrian refugee created a translation app that helped immigrants navigate legal systems. At the graduation ceremony, I gave a short speech. 3 years ago, I lost everything. My marriage. My job. My sense of who I was in the world. I could have stayed in that loss. Let it define me. Instead, I used it to understand something crucial. The work matters more than the recognition. The impact matters more than the credit. And the people you help rise matter more than the people you watch fall. The Detroit mother, Keisha, approached me afterward. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you were at your lowest, when everything fell apart, how did you not just give up? I thought about those 11 months. The tiny apartment. The hardware store. The law books piled on every surface. The careful, methodical planning that turned humiliation into strategy. I did give up, I said. I gave up on the version of myself that thought the world was fair. That believed good work would be automatically rewarded. That assumed people meant what they said. I gave up on naivete. What I didn't give up on was the work itself. The creating. The building. The solving of problems. That's what saved me. Not revenge. Not money. Just the act of making something real. She nodded slowly. I'm going to remember that. Good. Because you're going to need it. This industry chews up people like us. People who didn't come from money or connections. People who had to fight for every opportunity. They'll underestimate you. Underpay you. Take credit for your ideas. The question isn't whether that'll happen. It's how you'll respond when it does. How should I respond? Document everything. Trust your gut. Know your worth. And never, ever assume that loyalty flows both ways. She hugged me. Thank you for this opportunity. For believing in people like me. Thank you for doing the work. That's all I asked for. Year 2 at Quantum Dynamics brought unexpected challenges. A competitor filed a lawsuit claiming our neural processor infringed on their patents. The case was frivolous. Our technology predated theirs by 5 years, but it tied up resources and created uncertainty. Patricia called me into her office. Marcus, I need to know something. When you sold us these patents, did you do complete due diligence? Is there any possibility this competitor has a legitimate claim? None. I can prove conception dates going back a decade. Lab notebooks. Dated prototypes. Witness testimony from colleagues at TechFlow. Including Derek and Paul? I smiled. Especially Derek and Paul. Their own emails document when I developed each component. They'll testify, even if they don't want to. Because they're in prison and have to. Exactly. Patricia laughed. You're terrifying sometimes. You know that? I prefer thorough. The lawsuit was dismissed in preliminary hearings. The competitor's legal team hadn't done basic research. They'd assumed our patents were vulnerable because of the TechFlow bankruptcy. They'd assumed wrong. But the experience shook something loose in me. Made me realize that even legitimate ownership could be challenged. That success painted targets on your back. That the victory I'd won 2 years ago wasn't permanent, it required constant defense. So I did something I'd resisted. I hired a personal attorney. Not for lawsuits. For protection. To review every contract. Every agreement. Every partnership. To make sure that what happened with Derek and Paul could never happen again. The attorney, a sharp woman named Lisa Chen, another Chen, I noted with irony, reviewed my situation and whistled low. You've been operating without representation this whole time? Rachel handled the patent sale and the trial. I mean personally. Employment contracts. Intellectual property agreements. You're generating millions in value for quantum dynamics and I don't see a single protection clause in your employment agreement. What do you mean? She pointed to the document. This contract says anything you create while employed belongs to the company. It's a standard work for hire clause. Marcus, every patent you file from this point forward, quantum dynamics owns it automatically. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd escaped one company stealing my work only to sign it away to another. Can we renegotiate? We can. But it'll be delicate. Patricia trusts you. The board trusts you. But asking to change fundamental terms of your employment might make them nervous. They might wonder if you're planning to leave. Or start a competitor. I'm not. I believe you. Will they? I spent a week crafting a proposal. Not demanding. Suggesting. A hybrid model where core innovations belong to quantum dynamics, but derivative works, technologies that built on my research but weren't directly funded by the company, remain jointly owned. Revenue sharing on patents filed outside my primary job responsibilities. A protection clause that prevented the company from using my work if I were ever terminated without cause. Patricia reviewed it with the general counsel. Then called me in. This is reasonable, she said. More than reasonable. But I have to ask, why now? Are you planning to leave? No. I'm planning to stay. But I'm also planning to make sure that if circumstances change, I'm protected. Not because I don't trust you. Because I learned what happens when you don't protect yourself. She studied me for a long moment. Derek and Paul really did a number on you. They taught me an expensive lesson. I'd rather not repeat it. Fair enough. We'll accept your proposal with one modification. You agree to a 10-year minimum commitment. No leaving for competitors. No starting your own firm without giving us right of first refusal on licensing your existing patents. Done. We shook hands. The new contract was signed within a month. Lisa called it a masterclass in negotiation. You got everything you wanted without making them feel like they lost anything. That's because they didn't lose anything. They gained certainty. A 10-year commitment from someone generating value. That's worth more than ownership of patents I might never file. You think like a chess player. I think like someone who got checkmated once and refuses to let it happen again. Around this time, something strange happened. I started receiving letters. Physical letters, mailed to my office. From former TechFlow employees. The first was from Kevin, the junior engineer I'd responded to. The second letter was from a QA tester named Rebecca. I received 17 letters over 3 months. Not all of them were supportive. 3 were angry. One accused me of being a vindictive narcissist. Another claimed I destroyed lives out of spite. I read every single one. The angry ones especially. Because they weren't entirely wrong. My actions had consequences beyond Derek and Paul. People lost jobs. Lost stock options. Lost belief in the company they'd invested years building. Some of that was inevitable, TechFlow was rotten at its foundation. But some of it was collateral damage from my choice to pursue justice at any cost. I wrote back to the angry ones. Short responses. Acknowledging their pain. Not defending my choices, but explaining them. Offering references for job placement. Connecting them with recruiters. One responded. A former project manager named David. I kept that letter in my desk drawer. Read it whenever I started thinking of my revenge as purely righteous. A reminder that justice is messy. That even the right choices leave scars. Year 3 brought the biggest surprise of all. Jennifer called. Not texted. Called. Marcus, I need your help. It was the first time we'd spoken since the courthouse. Her voice sounded strained. Tired. What's wrong? My mother is sick. Cancer. Stage 4. She needs treatment that insurance won't cover. I've drained my savings. I'm applying for loans but my credit is terrible after the divorce and everything with Derek. I know I have no right to ask, but, how much do you need? Silence. Then, quietly, 200,000. Maybe more depending on how she responds to treatment. Send me the hospital information. I'll take care of it. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can. Your mother was always kind to me. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of choices you made. I'll pay you back. I don't know how or when, but, Don't. Just make sure she gets the treatment. I wired the money that afternoon. 250,000. Enough to cover treatment and any complications. Lisa, my attorney, called it madness. Marcus, she destroyed your life. You owe her nothing. I'm not paying her. I'm paying for medical treatment for a woman who used to bake me cookies every Thanksgiving. That's different. Is it? Yes. Jennifer's mother survived. The treatment worked. She went into remission 6 months later. Jennifer sent a thank you card. Inside was a single sentence. I put it in the drawer next to David's letter. Reminders that people are complicated. That grace costs nothing and means everything. That revenge and kindness aren't mutually exclusive, they're just different choices made at different moments. The patents that destroyed tech flow now fund innovation at quantum dynamics. The technology that Derek tried to steal now develops tools for medical research, climate monitoring, disaster response. My work matters in ways it never could have under their leadership. And sometimes, late at night when the bay fog rolls in and the city lights blur into watercolor, I think about that moment in the Waterford Hotel ballroom. Jennifer's voice cutting through applause. Derek's averted eyes. Paul's pitying shoulder pat. I think about how close I came to just accepting it. Signing the papers. Taking the demotion. Disappearing into irrelevance because fighting seemed too hard, too messy, too uncertain. But I didn't. I chose to fight. Not with anger or drama. With patience and precision and the kind of long game thinking that turns victims into victors. The FBI agents at Derek and Paul's doors. The realization that every patent bore my name. The systematic dismantling of an empire built on lies. That was justice. Not revenge. Justice. There's a difference. And 11 months of planning, of studying, of waiting, that was the price of getting it right. In the end, what I learned from those 11 months of silence is this: betrayal will find you if you let your guard down, but response is always your choice. You can collapse under the weight of it, let bitterness define your days, or you can use that pain to rebuild yourself into something stronger, clearer, more deliberate. I didn't win because I was smarter or more ruthless. I won because I refused to let someone else's narrative become my reality. Because I understood that patience isn't passivity, it's power held in reserve. Because I remembered that the work you do in silence often speaks louder than anything you say in anger. To anyone reading this who feels overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed, your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. It's determined by what you build, what you protect, and what you refuse to surrender when the world tells you to accept less than you deserve. Sometimes the longest revenge is the one where you don't destroy yourself in the process. Where you emerge not broken or bitter, but wiser. Where you turn your pain into purpose and your silence into strategy. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't watching your enemies fall, it's building something they could never touch, creating value they could never steal, and walking away knowing you became more than they ever imagined you could be. That's not revenge. That's redemption. And it's available to anyone willing to endure the wait. Story 4.
My twin sister announced her pregnancy at our parents' 30th anniversary party and said, "Finally, the good daughter is giving you grandchildren." Everyone cheered. My mother hugged her and said, "At least one of you turned out right." I'd had 3 miscarriages that year, they all knew. I smiled, congratulated her, and left early. 8 months later, she went into labor and demanded I be in the delivery room to see what a real woman looks like. I went. I held her hand. I smiled at the baby. Then I walked out of the hospital, and what I did next made my sister scream so loud the entire maternity ward heard her. Finally, the good daughter is giving you grandchildren. Jessica's voice cut through the champagne-fueled chatter like a blade. The entire backyard went silent. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, a piece of anniversary cake balanced on the tines. Mom dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the patio stones, red liquid spreading like blood. But she didn't even look down. Her eyes were locked on Jessica, who stood on the makeshift stage Dad had built for toasts, one hand dramatically pressed to her still flat stomach. "I'm 12 weeks along," Jessica announced, her voice dripping with something that made my skin crawl. "And before anyone asks, yes, it's a boy. We found out early through genetic testing." The crowd erupted. Aunts shrieked. Cousins clapped. Dad actually had tears in his eyes as he rushed toward her, arms outstretched. I sat frozen at my table in the back corner. The one they put me at, tucked behind the catering tent where I wouldn't be in any of the photos. Mom reached Jessica first. She wrapped her arms around my twin sister and sobbed into her shoulder. "Oh honey, oh my sweet girl. I'm so happy. So happy." Then she pulled back, held Jessica's face in her hands, and said it. Said the words that I still hear in my nightmares. "At least one of you turned out right." The party roared with laughter. Like it was a joke. Like it was funny. Jessica's eyes found mine across the crowd. She smiled. That specific smile we'd shared as kids when one of us got away with something. Except this time, I wasn't her co-conspirator. I was her victim. 3 miscarriages. January, April, and September. They all knew. Every single person in that backyard knew because Mom had made sure of it. Poor Claire just can't seem to hold onto a baby, she told everyone at Easter. Must be all that stress from her job. You know she works too much. Not natural for a woman. I stood up. My chair scraped against the flagstones. A few people glanced my way, then quickly looked back to Jessica, who was now showing off her phone with ultrasound photos. Congratulations, Jess, I called out. My voice sounded steady. Calm. I was proud of that. She turned, surprised I'd spoken. Thanks, Claire Bear. The childhood nickname felt like acid. Maybe you'll get lucky someday too. I walked to her. Hugged her. Felt her stiffen slightly. She'd expected me to break down, to run, to give everyone the drama they were clearly hoping for. I'm so happy for you, I whispered in her ear. Then I left. Nobody followed me. The next 8 months were interesting. Jessica called me twice in that time. Once to tell me she was having a baby shower and I wasn't invited because it might be triggering for you. Once to inform me that she'd named the baby Carson and wasn't that perfect. Mom called more often, but only to talk about Jessica. The nursery Jessica was designing. The organic meal plan Jessica was following. The prenatal yoga classes Jessica was teaching, yes, teaching, because apparently pregnancy had made her an expert on everything. I let them talk. I said that's wonderful and how exciting in all the right places. Meanwhile, I did my job. I worked as a forensic accountant for the FBI. Not exactly dinner party conversation material, which is probably why Mom always introduced me as working with numbers like I was a glorified bookkeeper. 3 weeks before Jessica's due date, I got assigned to a case that made my blood run cold. It started with a routine audit of a medical equipment company in Boston. Standard tax fraud investigation. But when I started pulling threads, the whole thing unraveled into something much bigger. The company was a front. The real business was embryo trafficking. They were working with fertility clinics, stealing viable embryos, selling them to desperate couples who couldn't afford legal fertility treatments. The names on the client list made me sick. But one name made me stop breathing. Dr. Marcus Whitley. Jessica's fertility specialist. The same doctor who'd told her after 3 months of trying that she had PCOS and would likely need years of treatment to conceive. The same doctor who'd then, miraculously, announced she was pregnant just 6 weeks later. I sat in my office until 2 a.m. that night, cross-referencing data. Payments. Dates. Medical records I definitely wasn't supposed to have access to but obtained through carefully worded warrant requests. By morning, I knew the truth. Jessica had never been pregnant. Not naturally. She'd bought an embryo from Dr. Whitley's illegal operation. But here's what made it truly twisted: the embryo she'd purchased had originally been harvested from a woman who'd undergone IVF 3 years ago. The embryo was genetically traced back to the donor couple through DNA markers in the medical records. The father's profile showed markers consistent with Nordic ancestry, high IQ predictors, and athletic propensity. The mother's profile showed artistic talent markers and no genetic disease flags. It was catalog shopping for a baby. But that wasn't even the worst part. I kept digging. I had to be sure. I had to be absolutely certain before I did anything with this information. That's when I found the second set of documents. Payment records showing that someone named C. Whitmore had also been a client of Dr. Whitley's embryo operation. C. Whitmore. My mother's maiden name was Whitmore. Catherine Whitmore. My mother had known. She'd helped Jessica buy a black market baby. The office phone rang. I jumped, knocking my coffee over. Brown liquid spread across my keyboard. Special Agent Claire Morrison. My voice was mechanical. Claire? It's Dad. I straightened. Dad never called me at work. Is everything okay? Jessica went into labor. She's at Mercy General. He coughed awkwardly. She's asking for you. Asking for me? Yeah, specifically. She made the nurse call. Said she wants you in the delivery room. Life is a sense of humor. A really messed up sense of humor. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up. Stared at my computer screen. At the evidence that could destroy my sister's life. My mother's life. Then I saved everything to an encrypted drive, locked my office, and drove to the hospital. The maternity ward smelled like disinfectant and hope. Nurse stations decorated with pink and blue ribbons. A father in the waiting room practicing breathing techniques with his wife. I found Jessica's room on the third floor. Room 347. Mom was outside, pacing. She saw me and her face did something complicated. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. She's been asking for you, Mom said. She's in a lot of pain, Claire. The epidural isn't working right. Okay. I moved toward the door. Mom caught my arm. Claire. Thank you. For being here. I know this year has been hard for you. Hard. That was the word she chose. Hard. It's fine, Mom. I pushed open the door. Jessica was on the bed, her face red and swollen, her hair plastered to her forehead. She looked like she'd been running a marathon. Tyler, her husband, stood next to her, looking terrified. Claire, Jessica gasped. Oh, thank God. I need you here. She broke off, screaming as a contraction hit. I walked to the other side of the bed. Took her hand. It was clammy and hot and gripping mine so hard I felt bones grinding. Breathe, Jess. In and out. She breathed. The contraction passed. She looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly, strangely lucid. I wanted you to see this, she said. I wanted you to see what a real woman looks like. What it looks like when someone actually succeeds at the one thing women are meant to do. Tyler made a noise. Jessica, that's not. Shut up, Tyler. She never took her eyes off me. Claire needs to understand. She needs to see that some of us are just better at this. More capable. More. Another contraction. More screaming. More bone-crushing grip on my hand. I smiled at her. You're doing great, Jess. 6 hours later, Carson Tyler Morrison came into the world weighing 7 pounds, 4 ounces. He had a tuft of blonde hair and blue eyes that would probably change color in a few weeks. Jessica held him. Cried. Tyler cried. Mom burst into the room and cried. I stood in the corner, watching. Do you want to hold him? Jessica asked. Her voice was softer now, exhausted. Almost kind. Sure. She passed him to me. He was warm. Impossibly small. His fingers curled reflexively around my thumb. He's beautiful, Jess. Congratulations. I handed him back. Smiled at everyone. Hugged my sister gently, careful of her stitches. I'm going to let you guys rest, I said. I'll come back tomorrow. I walked out of the room. Down the hall. Past the nurse's station. Into the elevator. On the ground floor, I pulled out my phone and called my boss. Morrison here. I need to execute the warrant on the Whitley case. Tonight. I have reason to believe evidence is being destroyed. Tonight? It's 11 p.m. Sir, I have a family member who's been directly affected by this operation. I need to move now before they cover their tracks. The subject just gave birth at Mercy General. Whitley's clinic is coordinating with this hospital. If we don't move now, we lose everything. A pause. Get a team together. I'll authorize it. They arrested Dr. Marcus Whitley at 3 a.m. in his home in Brookline. The FBI seized his clinic's records at 3:15 a.m. By 6 a.m., 37 other people connected to the embryo trafficking operation were in custody, including my mother. The evidence was irrefutable. She'd not only facilitated Jessica's purchase of an illegal embryo, but she'd been investing in Whitley's operation for 2 years. $50,000 of her and Dad's retirement money, funneled through accounts she'd set up without Dad's knowledge. She wasn't just an accomplice. She was a financial partner in a criminal enterprise. I was at my desk when the screaming started. Even from 3 floors down in the federal building, I heard Jessica's voice on the speakerphone of my colleague's desk. What did you do? Claire, what did you do? Agent Morrison from the criminal division poked her head into my office. Different Morrison, no relation. Your sister's on line 3. She's not happy. I'll bet. I picked up. Hey, Jess. They're taking him. They're taking Carson. They said he's evidence. They said, Claire, please, you have to fix this. I'm begging you. He's my baby. He's not your baby, Jessica. He's evidence in a federal investigation. He was purchased illegally from Dr. Whitley's embryo trafficking operation. His biological parents are actually a couple in Vermont who had their embryos stolen from a fertility clinic in 2022. I've already been in contact with them. They're on their way to Boston now. Silence. Then, quietly, you knew. You knew when you were in the delivery room. I found out the day before, actually. Once I confirmed Mom's involvement, I had everything I needed for the warrant. You're destroying our family. Mom could go to prison. I'm going to lose Carson. And for what? For revenge because I'm fertile and you're not? The laugh that came out of me surprised us both. You think this is about fertility? Jessica, you bought a human being. Mom helped you buy a human being. You committed multiple felonies. And then you spent 8 months rubbing it in my face, calling me a failure, making sure everyone knew I was broken while you were perfect. I didn't mean, yeah, you did. You meant every word. Every smug comment. Every pitying look. You wanted me to hurt, and I did. But the difference between us? When you hurt me, I cried in my car. When I hurt you, I used the law. Please, Claire. Please. Carson needs me. He's been with me for 8 months. I'm his mother in every way that matters. Actually, legally and biologically, you're a kidnapper. His real parents have been looking for their stolen embryos for 3 years. You stole their chance at a family. How do you think they felt? More silence. Then, you're going to testify against me? Against Mom. I'm the lead forensic accountant on the case. I don't have a choice. But honestly? Even if I did, I'd still do it. You don't get to play victim here, Jessica. You broke the law. Multiple laws. Serious ones. I hope you're happy, she spat. I hope destroying your family was worth whatever satisfaction you're getting from this. I didn't destroy our family. You and Mom did that when you decided that getting what you wanted mattered more than ethics, or laws, or anyone else's pain. I just made sure you faced consequences. I hung up. The trial took 14 months. Jessica was charged with conspiracy to commit embryo trafficking and several related charges. Mom was charged with investment fraud, conspiracy, and being an accessory to embryo theft. Dad, remarkably, had no idea about any of it. He was cleared of all wrongdoing after a thorough investigation. The courtroom was packed on day one. Media everywhere. Cameras outside. Reporters shoving microphones at anyone who walked past. I arrived through a side entrance, my FBI credentials getting me past security without the circus. Inside, the air felt thick with anticipation. This wasn't just another case. This was family destroying family, and everyone wanted to watch. Jessica sat at the defendant's table in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her lawyer, some hotshot criminal defense attorney Tyler's family had hired, kept whispering to her. She nodded occasionally, but her eyes were distant. Tyler sat 3 rows back. Not with her. Not supporting her. That told me everything. The prosecution called me first. I took the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Special Agent Morrison, the prosecutor began. Can you explain your relationship to the defendant? Jessica Morrison is my twin sister. A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge gavelled for silence. And despite this relationship, you investigated her involvement in the Whitley embryo trafficking case? I didn't investigate her specifically. I was assigned to audit a medical equipment company that turned out to be a front for Dr. Whitley's operation. During my investigation, I discovered my sister was a client. I immediately disclosed this to my superiors. They allowed me to continue with oversight because my expertise was crucial to unraveling the financial web. What did you discover about your sister's involvement? I pulled out the files. Walked the jury through every transaction. Every payment. Every communication between Jessica and Dr. Whitley's operation. The prosecutor projected the documents on a screen for everyone to see. Jessica's payments, $87,000 total. Paid in installments to avoid banking regulations. Routing through 3 different accounts. Special Agent Morrison, did you try to warn your sister before executing the arrest warrant? No. Why not? Because warning her would have been obstruction of justice. It would have given her time to destroy evidence or flee. My oath to uphold the law supersedes my familial relationships. The defense attorney cross-examined me for 3 hours. Tried to paint me as vindictive, jealous, using my position to punish my sister for being fertile while I wasn't. Isn't it true, Agent Morrison, that you suffered multiple miscarriages in the year before you arrested your sister? Yes. And isn't it true that your sister announced her pregnancy at a family gathering in a way that hurt you? She made comments that were insensitive, yes. Insensitive enough to make you want revenge? I looked directly at the jury. If I wanted revenge, I would have leaked this to the media before giving her a chance to surrender peacefully. I would have made the arrest public and humiliating. Instead, I followed protocol. I gathered evidence, obtained proper warrants, and conducted the arrest professionally. The fact that it involved my sister is unfortunate. But it doesn't change the fact that she committed multiple felonies. The defense attorney tried a different angle. You benefit from this case professionally, don't you? Big arrest, lots of publicity. Good for your career. I benefit from doing my job correctly. Whether the criminals I arrest are strangers or family members doesn't change my responsibility to the victims, in this case, the families whose embryos were stolen. After I stepped down, they called Tyler to the stand. He looked like he'd aged 10 years and 10 months. His wedding ring was gone. Mr. Morrison, what did you know about your wife's arrangement with Dr. Whitley? Tyler's voice cracked. Nothing. I swear, I knew nothing. Jessica told me she was pregnant naturally. I had no reason to doubt her. We'd been trying for months, and she said she'd finally gotten a positive test. I was thrilled. I didn't question any of it. When did you learn the truth? When the FBI showed up at our door at 6 a.m. with a warrant. They took Jessica. They took our son. They seized our computers, our phones, our bank records. I stood there in my pajamas watching my whole life fall apart, and I didn't even know why. What was your reaction when you learned your son wasn't biologically yours or your wife's? Tyler broke down. Actually sobbed on the stand. I loved him. I loved him so much. And he was just gone. They told me he belonged to another family, that Jessica had bought him illegally. I couldn't process it. How do you process something like that? The prosecutor showed mercy. Moved on quickly. But the defense attorney for Mom's case wasn't so kind during her trial a month later. Mom's attorney went hard on the family angle. Mrs. Morrison, why did you help your daughter purchase an embryo through illegal channels? Mom sat ramrod straight in her chair, her hands folded. She'd aged terribly in jail. Gray hair grown out. No makeup. The woman who'd always been so put together looked hollow. I wanted my daughter to be happy. She was desperate for a child. Dr. Whitley made it sound perfectly legal. He said these were surplus embryos that would otherwise be destroyed. I thought I was helping her save a life. Did you know it was illegal? A long pause. Too long. I suspected the price was unusually high. But I chose to believe Dr. Whitley when he said everything was legitimate. And your other daughter, Claire. How did you feel when she arrested your daughter, Jessica? Mom's face hardened. Betrayed. I felt betrayed. Whatever happened to family loyalty? Whatever happened to protecting your own? Do you still feel that way? Some days, yes. Other days, I realized my daughters, both did what they thought was right. Jessica wanted a child. Claire wanted justice. They just had very different ideas about what mattered most. The real biological parents of Carson, now legally renamed Benjamin by his actual parents, Mark and Jennifer Hoffman, sued Jessica and Tyler for emotional distress. They won a 7-figure settlement. When the Hoffmans took the stand, Jennifer could barely speak through her tears. We created 5 embryos through IVF. The clinic told us 3 weren't viable and 2 were destroyed in a freezer malfunction. We mourned them. We had a private ceremony. We planted a tree in our backyard for the children we'd never have. Then Agent Morrison called us 3 years later and said one of our embryos had been stolen and implanted in another woman. Our son was alive. He was out there. And someone else had been raising him as theirs. Mark held his wife's hand, his jaw tight. We'd given up hope of ever being parents. The IVF process nearly destroyed our marriage. The grief of losing those embryos was unimaginable. Then we find out one survived, but we lost 3 years with him. 3 years of first words, first steps, first everything. We can never get that back. The jury deliberated for 6 hours on Jessica's case. Guilty on all counts. 3 hours on Mom's case. Guilty on all counts. Jessica pleaded guilty to avoid prison time. She got 3 years probation, 500 hours community service, and a permanent record. Tyler divorced her 6 months later. Mom got 18 months in federal prison. Dad filed for divorce while she was serving her sentence. I testified at both trials. I presented the financial evidence. I showed the jury exactly how the money had moved, how the operation had worked, how many families had been destroyed by people who thought they could buy what they wanted without consequences. Jessica didn't look at me once during her trial. Mom stared at me the entire time, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Hatred, maybe. Or recognition that I'd finally done something she couldn't dismiss or minimize. On the day of Jessica's sentencing, she finally spoke to me. They let her approach me in the hallway during a recess, her lawyer close by. "I just want you to know," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "that I understand why you did it. I don't forgive you. I may never forgive you. But I understand. You saw something wrong, and you couldn't look away. That's who you are. It's who you've always been." Jessica. No, let me finish. I spent 8 months carrying a baby that wasn't mine, loving him, preparing for him, and you took that away. But those people, the Hoffmans, they spent 3 years mourning a child who was alive. I can't imagine that pain. I caused that pain. So yeah, I hate what you did to me. But I get it now. Finally. She walked away. I never saw her in person again for years. The media had a field day. FBI agent brings down family's baby trafficking ring ran in newspapers across the country. I gave exactly one interview, to a reporter from the Washington Post. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked me. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I regret that my sister felt so desperate to compete with me that she committed multiple felonies. I regret that my mother loved the idea of a grandchild more than she loved the concept of doing the right thing. I regret that I spent years trying to earn respect from people who were never going to give it to me. But do I regret exposing a criminal operation that had hurt dozens of families? No. Never. But the truth was more complicated than that interview suggested. The nights were hard. I'd lie awake wondering if I could have handled it differently. Warned them privately. Given them a chance to surrender before the arrest. Let them know what I'd found before I executed the warrant. But every time those thoughts crept in, I'd think about the Hoffmans. About their 3 years of grief over a child who was alive. About the other 12 families in the same position. About the couple still looking for their stolen embryos, not knowing if they'd ever find them. My job wasn't to protect my family. My job was to protect the innocent. Still, it cost me. The aunts stopped speaking to me. My cousin Amanda sent me a 10-page letter about family loyalty and betrayal. Old family friends crossed the street when they saw me coming. I became the cautionary tale at family gatherings, the ones I was no longer invited to. Remember Claire Morrison? She sent her own mother to prison. Can you imagine? Dad remained in my corner, though. He called me 2 weeks after Mom's sentencing. "I found some papers," he said. "When I was packing up the house for the divorce. Your mother had been tracking your fertility treatments. She had a file with all your medical information, dates of your miscarriages, notes about your emotional state. She was documenting everything. Why would she do that? I think she was building a narrative. Evidence that you were unstable, unreliable. Like she was preparing for something. Maybe she suspected you'd find out about the embryo purchase. Maybe she was planning to discredit you if you ever said anything." My stomach turned. She was going to use my miscarriages against me if I exposed her. Looks that way. I'm sorry, honey. I should have seen it. Should have stopped it years ago. After we hung up, I sat in my office and cried. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I finally understood the depth of my mother's betrayal. She hadn't just helped Jessica commit crimes. She'd been preparing to destroy me if I got in her way. 2 years after Carson, Benjamin, was returned to his biological parents, I got a letter. It was from Jennifer Hoffman, Benjamin's real mother. There was a photo enclosed. A little boy with blonde hair and Jennifer's eyes, grinning at the camera, holding a stuffed dinosaur nearly as big as he was. I put the letter in a frame. It sits on my desk at work now, next to my commendations and my badge. The case had ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. 6 other fertility clinics came under investigation. The FBI uncovered 2 more embryo trafficking operations in different states. Regulations changed. Security protocols improved. The Fertility Clinic Accountability Act passed through Congress 18 months after the Whitley trial, implementing mandatory tracking systems for all embryos and severe penalties for theft. I received a commendation from the director of the FBI. A promotion. Speaking invitations at conferences. But the weight never fully lifted. I'd done something irreversible. I'd torn my family apart, even if they'd planted the seeds of that destruction themselves. My therapist, yes, I got a therapist after all this, helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for their choices, only my own. That choosing justice over comfort didn't make me cold or heartless. It made me someone with integrity. You're grieving, She told me during one session. You're grieving the family you thought you had. The mother you wanted. The sister you could have been close to. Those people never really existed, but you love them anyway. It's okay to mourn them. So I did. I mourned the relationship with my twin sister that had died years before the arrest. I mourned the mother who'd chosen pride over love. I mourned the family gatherings that would never happen again, even though those gatherings had often been painful. And slowly, I started building something new. 3 years post-trial, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop in Cambridge. Completely by accident. She was working behind the counter, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She saw me. Her hands froze on the espresso machine. "Hi, Jess." "Claire." Her voice was flat. "How are you doing?" "How do you think I'm doing?" "I'm 34 years old, living in a studio apartment in Allston, working for $12 an hour, with a criminal record that means I'll never get a real job again. Tyler took everything in the divorce. Mom won't speak to me because I made it worse by buying the embryo in the first place. Dad won't speak to me because I broke Mom's heart. So yeah, I'm doing great." I nodded. Ordered my coffee. Waited while she made it, her movements sharp and angry. She shoved the cup across the counter. "There. That'll be $4.50. I handed her a 10. "Keep the change." "I don't want your pity money." "It's not pity. It's a tip." She stared at me. "Do you feel good about this? About destroying my life?" "I didn't destroy your life, Jessica. You did that yourself. I just made sure you faced the consequences of your choices. I wanted a baby. That's all. Is that really so terrible?" "Wanting a baby isn't terrible. Buying a stolen embryo, breaking federal laws, and then spending months making me feel worthless because I had miscarriages? Yeah, that's pretty terrible." Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones, for the first time I could remember. "I'm sorry. For what I said at the party. For everything. I was so jealous of you." That stopped me. "Jealous? Of me?" "You had everything, Claire. A career you loved. Respect. Independence. Mom always talked about how capable you were, how smart. I had nothing. I was just the pretty one. The social one. I thought if I had a baby, I'd finally have something that was mine. Something that made me matter. So you tried to take it from someone else." I didn't think of it that way. Dr. Whitley said the embryos would have been destroyed anyway. He made it sound like I was saving a life. He was a criminal, Jess. He was lying to you. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know that now. We stood there in the coffee shop, the espresso machine hissing, other customers waiting in line behind me. "I have to go," I said finally. "Take care of yourself, Jessica." "Claire?" Her voice caught. Do you think I can ever come back from this?" I thought about Jennifer's letter. About Benjamin. About the dozens of other families that had been reunited because of the investigation. I think people can always choose to do better. Whether you do or not? That's up to you. I left. 4 years later, I got an invitation in the mail. Cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering. There was a personal note attached in Jennifer's handwriting. The party was at a park in Vermont, sprawling green space with a lake and picnic tables. When I arrived, there were at least 30 people there. Parents. Children. All of them connected to the case. Benjamin ran up to me immediately, his blonde hair flying. "Are you Agent Claire? Mommy said you're the one who found me." "I am. Happy birthday, Benjamin." "I'm 5. He held up 5 fingers. "And I got a bike and a dinosaur cake, and, Tommy, come here. This is Agent Claire." Another little boy ran over. Then a girl. Then more kids, all of them born from embryos that had been stolen and recovered. Their parents shook my hand. Hugged me. Thanked me. Several of them cried. "You gave us our families back," one father told me. "Our daughter is 3 now. We'd accepted we'd never have children. Then you found her." Jennifer pulled me aside later, while Benjamin was demolishing his dinosaur cake with a pack of other 5-year-olds. "There's something I wanted to tell you," she said. "I heard through the grapevine that your sister is in therapy. Real therapy, working through her issues. She's been volunteering at a women's shelter, helping domestic violence survivors." I was quiet. "I'm not saying you should forgive her," Jennifer continued. "What she did was wrong. But I thought you should know she's trying to do better. Actually better, Not just performative. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you deserve to know that your actions had ripples. You didn't just save us. You potentially saved your sister from becoming someone even worse. By holding her accountable, you gave her a chance to become someone better. I looked out at the park. At Benjamin and the other children, playing and laughing. At their parents, watching them with a kind of love that comes from almost losing something precious. Thank you for inviting me, I said. Thank you for everything, Jennifer replied. You're part of our family story now? The hero of it. I wasn't so sure about the hero part. Heroes don't send their mothers to prison. Heroes don't testify against their twin sisters. But then Benjamin ran over and grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the lake to see the frogs he'd found, and I thought maybe Jennifer was right in a different way. Maybe I wasn't a hero. Maybe I was just someone who'd chosen to do the right thing when it was hard. When it cost me something. Maybe that was enough. 5 years after the trial, Dad reached out. We met for coffee in Boston, neutral territory. He looked older. Grayer. Tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. I owe you an apology, he said before I could even sit down. Multiple apologies, actually. I should have stopped your mother years ago from the way she treated you. I should have defended you. I should have been better. Dad, let me finish. He held up a hand. When the investigation started, I couldn't believe it. I thought there had to be a mistake. Your mother involved in something illegal? Jessica buying a baby? It seemed impossible. But then I saw the evidence. I sat in that courtroom and watched you present it, and Claire, you were magnificent. Professional. Thorough. Fair. You didn't editorialize or seek revenge. You just presented facts. It was my job. It was more than that. You could have buried it. Could have looked the other way. Your sister is your twin. Your mother raised you. But you didn't. You chose integrity over comfort. I sipped my coffee. Didn't trust myself to speak. I'm proud of you, Dad said. I should have told you that years ago. I'm proud of the work you do, the person you've become. Your mother and I failed you by making you feel like your worth was tied to having children. That was wrong. You are valuable because of who you are, not what you can produce. Thanks, Dad. I'm not asking you to forgive Jessica or your mother. That's your choice. But I wanted you to know that I see you. I've always seen you. I just failed to show it. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked. About his divorce from Mom, about his retirement plans, about my work. When we left, he hugged me tight. I love you, kiddo. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough. I love you too, Dad. 7 years post-trial, I got a promotion. Senior Supervisory Special Agent. My own team. A corner office with a view of Boston Harbor. I also got a letter from an unexpected source. The return address was a women's prison in Connecticut. The handwriting was familiar. I read it 3 times. Cried a little. Didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe not. But I kept the letter. 10 years after that anniversary party, I attended another one. Mark and Jennifer Hoffman's 10th wedding anniversary. They invited me personally. Your family, Jennifer said on the phone. You have to be there. Benjamin was 12 now, tall and gangly, still obsessed with dinosaurs. He hugged me when I arrived. Agent Morrison. Did you bring your badge? Can I see it? I showed him. He examined it with the seriousness of a kid who still believed in heroes. When I grow up, I want to be an FBI agent like you, he said. I want to help people find their families. Something in my chest cracked open. In a good way. Then work hard in school, I told him. Be honest. Stand up for what's right even when it's hard. That's what makes a good agent. Did you always know you wanted to do this job? No. I kind of fell into it. But once I realized I could use numbers and patterns to help people, to catch bad guys, I knew it was what I was meant to do. Even when the bad guys were your family? Kids. They just ask the hard questions without flinching. Especially then, I said. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing. But that doesn't make it any less right. He thought about that. Nodded. Okay. That makes sense. Later, as the sun set over the lake and Benjamin played with his friends, Jennifer sat next to me. He talks about you, you know. He calls you the lady who brought him home. He understands what happened, age appropriately. We've never lied to him about it. How does he feel about Jessica? He doesn't hate her, if that's what you're asking. He's curious about her. I told him that sometimes people make bad choices because they're hurting, but that doesn't excuse the choice. I told him his birth mother made a mistake, but that his Aunt Claire fixed it. Aunt Claire. The title settled over me like a warm blanket. Does he ever want to meet her? He's asked. When he's older, we'll see. If she's genuinely changed, if she's doing the work, maybe. But that's years away. I watched Benjamin chase fireflies with the other kids, his laughter carrying across the water. I never had children, I said quietly. The miscarriages, they damaged things. My doctor says it's unlikely I'll ever carry to term. For a long time, I thought that made me a failure. That I'd lost some fundamental part of being a woman. And now? Now I think there are a lot of ways to matter. A lot of ways to leave a mark on the world. I helped reunite dozens of families. I stopped a criminal operation. I raised the standards in my field. Maybe that's enough. Jennifer took my hand. It's more than enough. You gave us Benjamin. You gave 13 other families their children. You changed the world, Claire. Some people do that by having kids. You did it by saving them. 15 years later, I got another call. Is this Special Agent Morrison? The voice was young. Female. Uncertain. It is. Who's calling? My name is Sarah. Sarah Morrison. I'm your niece. I almost dropped the phone. Jessica's daughter? Adopted daughter, yeah. Look, I know this is weird. I got your number from Grandpa, from George, your dad. He said you might be willing to talk to me. How old are you, Sarah? 14. Mom adopted me when I was 4. After she got out of probation and did a bunch of therapy and classes and stuff. The adoption agency was really careful because of her record. How is Jessica? She's good. Really good, actually. She works as a counselor now, helping women who've been through trauma. She talks about you sometimes. About what happened. She uses it as an example of how hitting rock bottom can save your life. I was quiet. Anyway, Sarah continued, I'm doing a school project on women in STEM fields, and I wanted to interview you. About being an FBI agent. About your work. If that's okay. Your mom is okay with this? She suggested it, actually. She said you're the smartest person she's ever known, and that I should learn from the best. We set up a video call for the following week. When Sarah's face appeared on my screen, I saw hints of Jessica in her features, or maybe that was just wishful thinking. She had dark hair, bright eyes, and a notebook covered in stickers. She asked good questions. Smart ones. About forensic accounting, about investigations, about what it's like being a woman in the FBI. At the end, she said, Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you ever talk to my mom? Like, not for work or anything, just as sisters? No. We haven't spoken since I saw her at that coffee shop years ago. Do you think you ever will? I don't know, Sarah. What happened between us was complicated. I don't hate her. But I'm not sure we can go back to being family. She said the same thing. But she also said she hopes you're happy. That you deserve to be happy after everything. Tell her thank you for me. And tell her I'm proud that she's doing better. That she's helping other people. I will. Sarah smiled. Thank you for talking to me, Aunt Claire. This was really cool. Aunt Claire. The second time someone had called me that. Maybe family wasn't just about blood. Maybe it was about the people who showed up, who did the work, who chose love over convenience. Maybe I had more family than I'd thought. 18 years after the case, I ran into another family at a restaurant in Portland, Maine. I was there for a conference on financial crimes, grabbing dinner alone at a seafood place recommended by the hotel. A woman approached my table, hesitant. Agent Morrison? I looked up. She was in her mid-40s, with kinda eyes and nervous hands. Yes? I'm Rachel Torres. My daughter Emma, she was one of the children recovered in the Whitley case. She was 18 months old when you found her. The name clicked. The Torres family. Their embryo had been stolen from a clinic in Miami, implanted in a woman in Atlanta who'd paid $40,000 for it. Rachel. Of course. How is Emma? She's 16 now. She's here, actually. Having dinner with her dad across the room. Would you like to meet her? My heart clenched. Are you sure? She knows the story. We've always been honest with her. She knows you're the reason we got her back. Please. I followed Rachel to a table by the window. A teenage girl with Rachel's eyes and her father's smile sat next to a man I recognized from the trial photos. Emma looked up as we approached. "Emma, this is Agent Claire Morrison," Rachel said softly. "The woman I've told you about." Emma stood immediately. Extended her hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Agent Morrison." We shook hands. Hers was firm, confident. "Your mom says you know about the case." "Everything. Mom and Dad never hid it from me. They said you worked for months to find all of us. That you gave up your own family to make sure we got back to ours." "I didn't give them up. They made their choices." "Still. You could have looked the other way." "You didn't." Emma glanced at her parents, then back at me. "I'm studying law at Georgetown. I want to specialize in family law, helping kids in custody disputes and adoption cases. Because of you. Because you showed me that someone standing up for what's right can change everything." I felt tears building. Swallowed them back. "That's wonderful, Emma. The legal field needs people like you." Rachel invited me to join them for dinner. I accepted. We spent 2 hours talking about Emma's plans, about the other families from the case, about how the Fertility Clinic Accountability Act had changed the industry. "There's a support group," Rachel mentioned. "Families affected by the Whitley case. We meet twice a year, usually in different cities. The kids are all teenagers or young adults now. They want to organize something special, a thank you event for you. Would you consider coming?" I was just doing my job. "No," Emma said firmly. "You were doing more than that. You were fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. That's not just a job. That's a calling." 6 months later, I attended that event. It was held in a hotel ballroom in Washington, D.C. 13 families. 13 children, now young adults, who existed because I'd followed the evidence where it led. They created a presentation. Photos of each child as a baby, then photos of them now. Benjamin stood at the front, now 19 and finishing his first year at the FBI Academy. "Agent Morrison," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "We wanted to do something special to thank you. Not just for finding us, but for showing us what integrity looks like. What sacrifice looks like. What it means to stand up for others even when it costs you everything." Emma came forward next. "We've established a scholarship fund in your name. The Claire Morrison Justice Scholarship. It will support students pursuing careers in law enforcement, forensics, and social work. Students who want to make a difference the way you did." I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. One by one, the young adults came forward. Told me what they were doing with their lives. Doctors. Teachers. Social workers. Engineers. Artists. Lives that had almost been lost to greed and corruption. At the end, Jennifer Hoffman, Benjamin's mother, stepped forward with an envelope. "This is from all of us," she said. Every family contributed. "It's a portrait. We commissioned an artist to create something special." I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph of a painting, a woman standing alone in a storm, holding a lantern high. Light spilling out across turbulent water, illuminating paths through the chaos. At the bottom, a plaque, "Claire Morrison, she stood alone so others could find their way home." "The original is being installed at the FBI Academy," Jennifer continued. "Director's orders. He said your story should inspire every new agent who walks through those doors." That night, I stood at the hotel window looking out at the Capitol building, glowing white against the dark sky. Behind me, the families laughed and talked, their children, recovered, reunited, thriving, making plans for futures they almost didn't have. I thought about Jessica. Wondered if she ever thought about these families. If she ever truly understood what she'd almost taken from them. I thought about Mom, out of prison now, living alone in a small apartment in Florida. Dad had told me she volunteered at a crisis pregnancy center, helping young women navigate difficult choices. Maybe that was her redemption. Maybe not. I thought about the cost of what I'd done. The family I'd lost. The loneliness. The nights of doubt. And I thought about the lives I'd saved. Not just the children, but their parents. Their siblings. Their future children. Ripples spreading out across time, touching hundreds of people who would never know my name but who existed because I'd chosen truth over comfort. Would I do it again? Every single time. 20 years after that anniversary party, I retired from the FBI. 30 years of service. Dozens of commendations. A legacy that younger agents still talked about. At my retirement party, my team presented me with a photo collage. Pictures of all the families I'd helped over my career. The Hoffmans front and center, Benjamin, now a grown man studying criminal justice at college. There was a letter from him in the frame. I cried reading it. In front of everyone. Didn't even care. I'm 60 now. Living in a small house on Cape Cod with a view of the ocean. I never remarried after my divorce. Never had children. Never needed to. I have a life full of meaning. Former colleagues who call to chat. The families I helped, who send me Christmas cards every year. My dad, who visits every month. Even Sarah, who's now a social worker, who emails me occasionally with updates on her life. Jessica sends a card every year on my birthday. Nothing elaborate. Just a note. I never respond. But I keep the cards. Maybe someday I'll be ready to respond. Maybe not. Either way, I'm at peace with it. Because I learned something important through all of this: your worth isn't determined by what your family thinks of you. It isn't determined by whether you have children. It isn't determined by meeting someone else's definition of success. Your worth is determined by your choices. By whether you do the right thing when it matters. By whether you stand up for what's good and true and just, even when it costs you something. I did that. I paid the price. And I do it again. The families I saved? They're thriving. Benjamin is an FBI agent now, working in my old division. The other children are doctors, teachers, artists, engineers. They're living lives they almost didn't get to have. That's my legacy. Not children of my own, but dozens of children who are here because I did my job. Because I chose justice over comfort. And you know what? That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people you save. The people you stand up for. The people who choose to see you for who you really are. Love isn't always comfortable or easy. Sometimes love means holding people accountable. Sometimes it means letting them face consequences. Sometimes it means walking away so they can find their own path to redemption. But real love, genuine, deep, transformative love, always involves truth. And truth, even when it's painful, even when it destroys what we thought we knew, is the only foundation worth building on. If you're reading this and you feel unseen, undervalued, dismissed by the people who should love you most, please know, their inability to recognize your worth says nothing about your actual value. You are not defined by their blindness. Stand up for what's right. Do your job with integrity. Help people when you can. Build a life that matters to you, not to someone else's expectations. That's how you win. Not by destroying others, but by refusing to let their brokenness define you. That's how I won. And if I can do it, so can you.